what that looks like, and you know, so that's what you're going to see tonight. You're going to see a discussion around that. And we decided that we wanted to make sure, you know, mutually we decided that we want to make sure and have that discussion because it is an important one. So we look forward to those discussions tonight. We're hoping that we'll get through that entire PDU discussion tonight. You know, so in terms of like, you know, hopefully we'll get on to other things, but our goal is to make sure we get at least through that tonight. And if the talks continue to be fruitful, because we're counting on them being that way, then we'll schedule some time tomorrow. So just wanted to make sure and kind of get the lay of the land and let everybody know what we're thinking. Just thank you. Thank you for what you do for getting kids every day. And thank you for being here. We'll see you in a few minutes. There's pizza, there's drinks, you know each other. Say I! I believe! I believe that we will win! 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 Pause. That was not your teacher voice. That sounded like the district's voice. Time to use your teacher voice. You left us no choice.
We have to use our teacher voice.
You left us no choice.
We have to use our teacher voice.
You left us no choice.
We have to use our teacher voice.
You left us no choice.
We have to use our teacher voice.
You left us no choice.
We have to use our teacher voice.
You left us no choice.
We have to use our teacher voice.
You left us no choice.
We have to use our teacher voice.
You left us no choice.
We have to use our teacher voice.
You left us no choice.
We have to use our teacher voice.
You left us no choice.
We have to use our teacher voice.
Education is a right.
That is why we have to fight.
Education is a right.
That is why we have to fight.
Education is a right.
That is why we have to fight.
Education is a right.
That is why we have to fight.
Education is a right.
That is why we have to fight.
Education is a right.
That is why we have to fight.
Education is a right.
That is why we have to fight.
Education is a right.
That is why we have to fight.
Woo! Sí se puede. Sí se puede.
Sí se puede. Sí se puede. Sí se puede. Sí se puede.
Students first. Students first. Students first. Students first. Students first. Students first. Students first.
Are we switching? After fire right now. They don't have fire. Well, we're also still eating our dinner because we're going to be here. They were running late.
What time are you starting now?
When they arrive. I can wait. We can go to like 5:20. I just need them to like bring a megaphone. I keep forgetting mine. Do we want to do my favorite? Where's the district? 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 Where's the district?
All right. I don't want to like interrupt anyone.
We have to. We're starting like
We're okay. I think we're okay here.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Miss Cohen. What?
chair. No, that's for the bargainers. I don't get a chair. We'll take this one. No, you sound so excited. I'm allowed to sit on this floor?
I'm like sitting in somebody's chair and they're going to come pick me up. I don't understand why they just don't have this in like a school cafeteria, knowing that there are going to be hundreds of people. DPS, I swear to God. They're white. Are you all students? Is this all from your club? Oh, cool. So we're kicking it off on the 16th. And then you guys will have a little experience and go to campaign. Join my campaign. We have 15 student organizers.
Hey everyone, this is Alex with Unicorn Riot. I'm here in Denver, Colorado at the second bargaining meeting between the Denver Classroom Teachers Association, which is the Denver Teacher Union, and Denver Public Schools District. This is the second meeting since the DCTA voted with 93% approval of a strike, and the DCTA announced a couple days ago that they are officially going to be striking this coming Monday, February 11th. And this meeting is going to go a little later. The DPS is running late, so this meeting is not going to start until 5:30 Mountain Standard Time. There were some folks here that found some DPS bargaining team notes in the recycling bin that someone is posting up right now on the wall, and they are to train new substitute teachers for when the teachers are striking. The first skill is getting and keeping students on task. The second skill is maintaining a positive teacher-to-student interaction. Skill 3 is teaching expectations. Skill 4 is responding non-coercively. And skill 5 is avoiding being trapped. And those are the 5 skills that DPS is training the new substitute teachers on. And the lead bargaining team negotiator for DCTA, for the union, said when he was mentioning that DPS is running late, he mentioned that tonight they're going to focus on the professional development units at this meeting, and they're going to try to reach an agreement on the PDUs here tonight. However, they still intend to strike. This is just to reach agreements so that the strike won't have to last as long as it may have if they weren't going to reach any agreements. And thanks for tuning in tonight. If you appreciate our continued coverage on this issue, you can go to unicornriot.ninja and click on our Support Our Work tab. We made a short video from the last bargaining meeting that you can find on our Vimeo page and on our Facebook. The room is filling up really quickly here. There are a bunch of people standing in the back of the room already.
What do we want? Fair pay! When do we want it? Yesterday! When do we want? Fair pay! When do we want it? Yesterday! What do we want? Fair pay! When did we want it? Yesterday! What do we want?
see what they think of Elizabeth Warren. So.
I'm live right now, I'm a journalist with Riot. Would you be interested in just answering a few questions?
Only if I know what they are ahead of time.
Okay, just why you're here today, basically. Yeah, okay. So if you want to, this is the mic, so let's try to get you closer to it.
No, okay.
Okay. So yeah, if you want to state your name and why you're here.
Well, my name is Dixie Lingler, and I'm here because after 34 years of teaching, I am so deeply concerned about the direction that this district has taken education here. I am so disappointed in the way they have treated teachers, how they've treated students, even though they say students first. I am disappointed that one of the core values is integrity, and I don't see it coming from the top. I am disappointed that I just read they have 1,400 people that they can send out of central administration to sub next week in the event that teachers walk out. 1,400 people in central administration is a huge number. I am disappointed when I hear that administrators got $4 million in bonuses when teachers can't afford to live. And so I am fighting because I believe in education. I believe that it is the most important thing that we can do to have a good society. It's our responsibility as teachers to make good citizens. And that's why I'm fighting. Right?
Wait, can we actually sit in the middle? No, actually. No, you can't. Oh no!
So we just heard from a retired teacher. She retired earlier this year because she couldn't take how the district was running things anymore.
These unfair wages got to go, hey, hey! Ho, ho! These unfair wages got to go, hey, hey! Ho, ho! These unfair wages got to go, hey, hey! Ho, ho! These unfair wages got to go, hey, hey! Ho, ho! These unfair wages got to go, hey, hey! Ho, ho! These unfair wages got to go, hey, hey! Ho, ho!
I need to get one of those like megaphone things. I know. Did we not bring all of ours like from CEA?
No, but really.
No one's stopping us. Let's do it. Wait, pause. There's too many people on my name. Yes. Keep getting students and keeping on task. Whisper.
Our schools! Our schools! Whose schools? 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 Our schools! Our schools!
All right, everybody, real quick. Stand up. Get the energy flowing through your body. We're going to do some chants, standing up and moving around. Woo! Stand up. If they won't pay us, shut it down. 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 A little louder. If they won't pay us, shut it down.
the mic is right here, so if you can just lean in as close as you can.
I'll just...
Yeah, if you want to state your name and then say why you're here and maybe what school you go to.
Another one. My name is Henry Waldstreicher, and I go to George Washington High School, and I'm here because my teachers have had such a phenomenal impact on my life. I'm not lying when I say I wouldn't be standing here today without them. And it's impossible for us as students to be successful when our teachers aren't being paid, and when our teachers are leaving the district because they can't get a fair living wage. That's why I'm here.
Oh, sure. So the mic is right here.
Okay.
So just lean in.
Okay.
Yeah, if you don't mind saying your name and what school you go to and why you're here.
Whatever. Okay. My name's Cora Galpern. I'm a senior at George Washington High School, and I'm here to support my teachers and increase the need for transparency in the process. The district has done a lot to try and suppress our voices. We see it here today. We don't fit in this room, so we actually have to sit in the middle of the circle of these tables, and so I'm here to support my teachers and show up in numbers.
That is why we have to fight. Education is alright. That is why we have to fight. Ho ho! These unfair wages got to go. Hey hey! Ho ho! These unfair wages got to go. Hey hey! Ho ho! These unfair wages got to go. Hey hey! Ho ho! These unfair wages got to go. Hey hey! Ho ho! These unfair wages got to go. Hey hey! Ho ho! These unfair wages got to go. Hey hey! Ho ho! These unfair wages got to go. Hey hey! Ho ho! These unfair wages got to go.
What do we want?
Fair pay.
When do we want it?
Yesterday.
What do we want?
Fair pay.
When did we want it?
Yesterday.
What do we want?
Fair pay.
When did we want it?
Yesterday.
What do we want?
Fair pay.
When did we want it?
Yesterday.
What do we want?
Fair pay.
When did we want it?
Yesterday.
What do we want?
Fair pay.
When did we want it?
Yesterday.
What do we want?
Fair pay.
When did we want it?
Yesterday.
What do we want?
Fair pay.
When did we want it?
Yesterday.
What do we want?
Fair pay.
When do we want it?
Yesterday.
What do we want?
Fair pay.
When do we want it?
Yesterday.
What did we want?
Fair pay.
When did we want it?
Yesterday.
What did we want?
Fair pay.
When did we want it?
Yesterday.
What did we want?
Fair pay.
When did we want it?
Yesterday.
Sneak in front of you.
First.
Just pass by.
First.
Thank you.
Students first.
What?
Students first.
What?
Students first.
What?
Students first. Students first.
things that help maneuver. And presumably some people that actually want to do it. I can't tell.
Where's the
She's really out of it.
Where's the district?
Right. No,
Where's the district?
no, I agree.
Where's the district? Where's the district?
Teachers, please stand and let's welcome the district with our teacher national anthem.
We're the Denver classroom teachers, working with kids all day. We are here to tell the district that they must give us fair pay. If their choice is to refuse us, sadly we'll leave our seats. Since they do not value teachers, we will hit the streets. Marching arm in arm, sending the alarm. DCTA members, we are strong. The community has voice, the students are our choice. Value us and give fair pay. We're the Denver classroom teachers, working with kids all day. We are here to tell the district that they must give us fair pay. If their choice is to refuse us, sadly we'll leave our seats. Since they do not value teachers, we will hit the streets.
If they don't pay us,
Shut it down.
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 I didn't hear you. If they don't pay us,
Shut it down.
if they don't pay us,
Shut it down.
if they don't pay us,
Shut it down.
we're not gonna
Take it. No, we're not gonna take it. We're not gonna take it anymore. We're not gonna take it. No, we're not gonna take it. We're not gonna take it anymore.
one more time.
We're not gonna take it. No, we're not gonna take it. We're not gonna take it anymore.
Pay us now.
Pay us now. Pay us now. Pay us now. DCTA, 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 DCTA,
What do we want?
Fair pay.
When did we want it?
Yesterday.
What do we want?
Fair pay.
When did we want it?
Yesterday.
What do we want?
Fair pay.
When did we want it?
Yesterday.
What do we want?
Fair pay.
When did we want it?
Yesterday.
What do we want?
Fair pay.
When did we want it?
Yesterday.
What do we want?
Fair pay.
When did we want it?
Yesterday.
What do we want?
Fair pay.
When did we want it?
Yesterday.
Dixie.
There's teacher training notes on the wall. Really solid.
Lots of sticky notes.
everybody.
Good evening, John.
Hi, Jen.
My name is John Newmare. I'm a mediator. I've been asked by the association and the district to join these talks. I've been a part of them except for last week, since mid-November. I understand there's a lot of energy, a lot of emotion in the audience tonight. I would ask that you allow the negotiators the opportunity to do what they've come here to do tonight, to negotiate. We're going to go around the room and ask everyone to introduce themselves. But that's my request as the mediator. Let's see if we can make some progress tonight. I know that's what all of you want. And so we'll start the negotiations process. So Jeff, we'll start with you.
My name is Jeff Buck. I'm a math teacher at Denver South High School.
Hi, I'm Greg Harnsbrake. I teach physical education at Bruce Randolph.
I'm Brian Weaver. I teach 6th grade math at Florida Pitt Waller in the corner of Pete.
I'm Liz Valencia Hernandez, and I teach English and Ethnic Studies at Thomas Jefferson High School.
Henry Roman, president of DCTA.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rob Gould. I'm a teacher on special assignment. I'm a peer observer. So.
I'm Pam Schamberg, retired DPS teacher and DCTA staff.
I'm Jane Linneman. I'm a school psychologist.
Corey Kern, DCTA staff.
Becca Hendricks, high school math, Emily Griffith, high school.
I'm Dana Berge. I'm an ECE art teacher at Pascual Ladue in Southwest Denver.
I'm Michelle Horwitz. I am a speech-language pathologist on the bilingual assessment team. Hi, I'm Susanna Corva, superintendent here in DPS.
Hi, I'm Debbie Hirty. I'm chief of human resources in DPS. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Berge. I'm general counsel for DPS.
Mark Ferrandino, chief financial officer for DPS. Can we ask that you all be loud because we can't always hear you? Please, thank you.
Teacher voices only tonight.
That's great. Okay, so Rob, Susanna, who would like to begin the conversation this evening?
Yeah, I guess I just want to tell you, thanks for being here tonight, and we're going to work through and see what we can do, tonight. And I think we talked earlier about, starting with the PDU conversation, so we can kind of go in that direction. And we did want to, I know we're scheduled from 5 to 8 tonight. We did want to just kind of, mention that if things are, if the discussions are feeling fruitful, we are, we'll definitely be willing to stay a little bit later tonight, even come back tomorrow. But just want to make sure that we put that out there.
Us as well. Great. So thank you, Rob. Really appreciate that opening and framing for it. And I just want to say and name, I'm really glad we're back at the table. I think it's really important for us to be able to be at the table talking, negotiating, and working to get to a deal. I think it's the most important thing we can do. I certainly have heard from so many people how important this is to everyone, and even the people who have written to me, spoken to me, who have talked about how willing they are to strike. It's not because they want to. It certainly is not because they're looking forward to it. It's certainly not because they are invested in any kind of disruption, but because they're so passionate about where we are. And obviously the way to get to a deal, to avert that, is for us to be talking. So I'm really glad that we're here. And it really is my desire as well. We've got just a couple days before you've said that a strike could start, and so I think it's really a good sign that we're here and that you're willing to stay as long as we are able to be productive, and so I think that's important. I think it's also really important to just note that as we both talked with the governor's office, with the Department of Labor and Employment, there have been some key things that have come out. Certainly, we're not that far apart. There's a lot actually that we agree on, and I think that's really important to note and to acknowledge that there's a lot more that I think that brings us together than that separates us. And I think we can get through those differences to be able to do that. And frankly, the impact of a strike on our students, the loss of instructional time, the loss of pay for teachers, if we can be here, let's do that. That's exactly where I am. I want to just share a couple thoughts. I spent some time rereading the original ProComp agreement. There's so much about that agreement that doesn't make sense anymore. But there are a few things about it that I thought were really important, less in terms of the details and more in terms of the approach that I think can be helpful for us as we think now. There were some common goals that were laid out at the beginning of the agreement. And I think it's a really important time for us to sort of realign on what the goals are of the system for us. And I thought it was really a good reminder, and it connected me to what people are telling me, that the system should motivate people. And I've certainly heard from here at this table, from people in the schools, from teachers, from parents, about the importance of motivation within our system. It talked about the importance of promoting career paths and how important that is for us to be able to have a system that promotes the opportunities for teachers to grow, to develop, to stay, and to get better, to enhance the professional standing of teachers, which I'm deeply committed to. And finally, one of the things that it said in the original agreement was that we need to create a system that actually works, that's sustainable, is fiscally sound, that works, that's understandable, not necessarily descriptors I think that any of us would use of our current system, and why I'm so committed to getting a new one. And we've made a lot of progress, and I just wanted to share a couple of places that we've made progress that I think are really important. We all agree that ProComp is too complicated, and so we've tried to approach this with a much clearer approach to a salary table that's simple. We've heard that there's too much in incentives, and we agreed, and we've moved millions of dollars out of incentives into base. We've heard that compensation needs to grow, and we agree. We think it's critically important that we grow the pie. And so on top of general fund investments, on top of ProComp, we've put additional funding into teacher pay, $23.5 million right now, with $10.5 million of that coming from deep cuts in the central office. We've heard that ProComp needs to be much more predictable. We completely agree. We've moved away from incentives that had high volatility within them. And I've had lots of conversations over the last several days around the ProComp pie was the same pie. As we got bigger with our teachers, we had to share that money across all those people, and people got less money. That's not okay. That's part of the reason why we'd like to have the incentives that we do have be a fixed price so that it's dependable, reliable, and tied to what we think is the most important. We understood the concerns about distinguished schools being tied only to the SPF. We've already agreed to move away from that. We heard frustrations about being capped and not being able to grow salary past 14 years. And so our proposal has removed any caps that we've had. I think that's also really important. We heard that we need to focus on retention, that retention is an issue in our district. We've addressed that in the current proposal that we put on the table with a longevity increase where you can move a lane through longevity, and also through our approach to thinking about our highest priority incentives to promote retention in the places that have the highest turnover. But what we wanted to commit to for tonight, and lots of people say, why are we even coming back to the table? What's the purpose? I think it's really important that we do have a conversation about places where we're not yet in agreement and where we can have further dialogue about where we can do that. In the last session, I heard very clearly the importance of being able to honor teachers for their growth and development, which is why we said we'd like to have a conversation tonight about professional development and how professional development can contribute to compensation for our teachers and our SSPs. So in the most recent proposal that you have shared with us, your approach to the professional development aspect is pretty wide open. And so I think it's important that you're willing to come to the table with us tonight to talk about a system that would have some guardrails to it that could help us make sure that we're honoring educators for their growth and development, and that we also create a system that is sustainable, that's fiscally sound, and that is a system that we can invest in over time. So I think that's really important. And right now, as I mentioned, the current proposal had none of those guardrails on it, and it's fairly wide open, and we believe is probably not sustainable in its current design. And so our hope is that we can have the conversation to how to find a way to honor meaningful learning experiences for our teachers and SSPs, particularly around the areas that are most important to the areas of need that we have as a district, around closing the gap that we see with our students who are Black, Latino, or low-income students when we compare their outcomes to others. And we've also heard that there's a lot of bureaucracy around PDUs, and from our perspective, that's why we had an approach that took the money out of PDUs and built it into steps to try to eliminate some of those hoops that people say they had to jump through, and that's part of our base builders in our approach. We don't want a system that perpetuates the challenges of bureaucracy, and we think that we've heard that there's a real desire to have an opening conversation about this. And so we're very eager to engage in that, and what we'd like to do is we'd like to open it up so that we could begin to talk about what guardrails would look like around professional development units.
Thank you. There's a lot to unpack there. Definitely, I think as we start to think about where we are tonight, you know, it is important to know that when we originally developed ProComp, we did that jointly, and we did that as a partnership. In our view, the partnership was not honored as we moved through from 2008 till now. So we do look forward to moving back into that component of a partnership. I think we on the team, we've been talking a lot about what that will take, and it will take the district recognizing us as a partner and actually treating us as a partner, which means they have to listen to us. We've heard from teachers all over the last 5 years of the parts of ProComp that work and the parts that don't work. And I think, you know, right now we've really focused a lot in our proposals around the parts that don't, you know, making sure that we get rid of those parts that don't work and make sure that we, you know, put the money where we need to for the parts that do. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts around the professional development being wide open, what some of those concerns were there, and then the word you used, the bureaucracy around the PDUs. I don't believe we ever mentioned that component of it because, as I recall, there's two people that run the PDU department, and then Shirley Scott comes in and supports them from time to time. And to me, two teachers on special assignment that support that department, it's not necessarily a bureaucracy. But I do look forward to hearing more about that. I do remember that where we went with that was around the additional hoops that we had to jump through this year. You know, and I've spoken to the PDU department, and they've already assured me they're working on some of those hoops. But I do want to make sure that I circle back around to an important point. You know, as we started through this path of discussions and negotiations 15 months ago, we really wanted to make sure that ProComp, and we wanted to make sure that Denver Public Schools was a leader in professional pay. That was the original intent of ProComp in teachers' eyes. ProComp, and Henry can speak to this, Jeff can speak to it, I think we all can speak to it. But it was meant to be, the promise that was made to teachers was that you would make a professional salary throughout your career, and you would be able to build that professional salary throughout your career. Our concerns, especially this week, have been that while we were hoping to make sure that ProComp made us a leader and that DPS continue to be a leader, we're actually already falling behind. We're falling behind in a lot of, in many ways when it comes to salary schedules. I know you've heard this week that Westminster came out with a tentative agreement, and that tentative agreement, they actually start their salaries at $50,000. So they beat us to the $50,000 mark. And in addition to that, they have a pathway to $100,000 within 15 years. And even if we get to the point where, if you were to just come out and say tonight, DCTA, you're right, we're finally listening and we're agreeing to everything that you asked for, we're still now going to be the middle of the pack. We're no longer going to be those leaders, and hopefully we'll get to that place in the next few years. But you know, I think everybody here and everybody certainly on this team and all the teachers that are out there watching, they know how important it was that we get to a place, a settlement quickly. We haven't been able to do that, and unfortunately we've gone this far to this point. So we do hope that tonight, and if we do move into tomorrow, that you keep that in mind, that we are, you know, we need to make sure that Denver continues to be a leader and not just a follower.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because we took a close look at Westminster. We saw their salary schedule as well and wanted to make sure, like, okay, are we staying competitive? Because that's a critical question for us as well. And I think this is an area where I think having these conversations is so important because the details matter. As we've talked about before, the starting salary and your ending salary don't necessarily determine what your lifetime earnings will be. And so when you're looking at a salary schedule, like Westminster that has really tiny, tiny steps and then caps in the lanes so that if you don't start getting your advanced degree.
Or professional development.
Yeah, or professional development. Which we're here to talk to you about tonight. But, you know, I would just say be cautious when you look at numbers and make sure that you're adding up what the step increases are over the lifetime, because you're not actually going to earn more if your growth is tiny, tiny, tiny inside of those steps. So
great point, Michelle.
Write that one down.
No, thank you, Michelle. We'll keep that in mind, and we hope you do too. So, you know, one of the things, I guess let's go ahead and get started, and we just want to ask you for ideas around the language that you are thinking about in terms of making PDUs as, quote, sustainable, fiscally sound, and something that we are able to invest in. You know, currently, in our last proposal, you know, we talked a bit about PDUs, and we talked about having some, what I refer to as limiters within it. And so the limiters that we've already agreed to and talked about have been, you can only move one lane per year, right? So that's part of our proposal currently. It's equal to 3 college credits and 15 hours of district in-service, and equivalent would be 1 college credit about, right? So those are the things that we're looking at in terms of where we've been so far. And we look forward to your ideas, because we really, you know, and I think you've heard it say over and over again how important PDUs are really to Denver Public Schools, to our organization, because it's the way that we drive our values, right? And whether it be an additional curriculum that we want teachers to learn and think about, whether it be an initiative like culturally responsive teaching that we want teachers to know, or about the framework for effective teaching. There's been a lot of great things that have come from PDUs that actually have improved our teachers' work with students. And so we want to make sure to continue that throughout. So, what are some ideas you have, or what are your concerns?
Thank you. I want to make sure I heard what you just said there. So it certainly sounded like you were saying that the limiters were that you could only move 1 lane per year, and that a PDU would be the equivalent of 3 credits in how it would be applied. Would love to know from your perspective, and I'm just trying to pull up the language from the most recent proposal. Can I see that? One of the places where we'd like to have more dialogue is around both the number of PDUs that can be completed in a year. And then I was really curious to know, Rob, from your perspective, you just talked about professional development around some of the areas that have been really important to the district, like culturally responsive teaching, like when we first started with the framework for effective teaching in areas of that. Would be really open to having conversations with you around, does it make sense to have some limitations around the topics of PDUs aligned to areas of need that we could jointly, as you named, like in partnership, lay out, so that we know that the work that we're doing is actually helping advance the goals of the organization as we work. And so would love to be able to have that conversation.
Just to make sure I got it, Susanna, the two concerns you were saying was the number of PDUs that can be completed and the language around the topic of the PDUs?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so we have stated this in previous negotiation sessions, so I'll reiterate some of that we've talked about. You know, in terms of the number of PDUs that can be completed, you know, we don't see a reason to put a limit on that necessarily, but we're ready for your ideas. You know, what we have communicated in the past is that I know that a number of us have tried to do 2 PDUs in a year, and we know that that's to the point where it's, you know, you forget what your children's names are, and you you know, forget what day it is a lot of times, and it's a lot of work to complete 2 PDUs a year. And we don't think a lot of teachers are going to go out and do that. You know, they may do 2 if they're really working hard. There's a few that do more. I know you came in and you said there was a couple of people that had completed 8 in a year, and I would love to hear more about that, because when I talked to Mark Arsenault about it, he really didn't understand where that came from. Mark Arsenault, as you know, works in the PD department, and so we're curious about that. We were thinking that we may have traced it back to some teachers that were working on a Guided Reading Plus initiative, where they were actually going through and getting certified in Guided Reading Plus to bring it and to teach it to other teachers. But that's the only incident that we've heard of that. And so if you have more examples of that, we'd love to hear them.
Yeah, I think it's probably less helpful to talk about specific examples and more helpful to talk about what would we put actually in writing.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but I think part of it is, you know, when you're coming out and you're wanting to put limits on it, you know, let's base it in reality. Let's not base it in something that is like a fluke in terms of that.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things I think that is really important, and part of why I'm glad we're back talking is, I think talking can really help us make sure we sort of understand the concepts. But as you have shared with us before, it's really important that we get that into writing, because what's hard then is, and in fact, I'm just trying to pull up the most recent proposal that you shared with us, and I apologize, I'm having a hard time actually.
I realize I don't think I ever got an electronic copy.
Corey, would you mind sending them one?
It'd be great if you could send us one. Yeah, that'd be great. And to some degree, it's because I think sometimes I hear something.
It's on our website, by the way. Sorry.
When we looked on the website, actually, it looked like it was the 8th proposal. So we should just check and see if it's the most recent.
We updated that, but I'll send you it.
Okay. It could be that when I looked at it earlier this week that it hadn't been updated yet. And partly the reason why I think it's really important that we are both talking, negotiating, and trading proposals is it actually helps me understand both what we mean and what we write. And there have been multiple times, I think, when we have meant something the way we write it. You've asked us questions, it's like, oh no, that's not what we meant, we wrote it wrong. And the same thing I think can happen when we talk, which is, I think I understand it this way, maybe it's not exactly what you mean. Getting it into writing really does make a difference to be able to do that. And so as soon as I get the language from Corey, you can like it's down from the site right now. Okay.
It's not. I'll send
I appreciate the need to get stuff into writing, but my feeling is that we need to be solving an actual problem before we commit anything to contracting. And so having a conversation about what the actual problems with PDUs are and what the parameters might be, I think is very valuable. And so to that extent, I think discussing some specific examples could be helpful if that addresses some of the problems that you've expressed.
very, very spot on. So the problem that I want to make sure that we're solving is that we're creating a system that both rewards teachers for the work that they do to grow in their profession, either through credits that they take at college level, or if we're going to have PDUs, through PDUs, and is financially and fiscally sustainable. And so what I'm saying is, I want to make sure that whatever we actually end up with is a system that works, and that meets those criteria that I think were in the original, and I think we would still share, around the system itself has to work, which is why putting in those guardrails. And I'm certainly not saying that everybody's doing 8 PDUs a year. But what I am saying is building a system that has the right guardrails on it is really critical. And so I've heard you say, like I've heard you say, doing 2 a year is really challenging. So I'd be curious to know, like, would you be open to limiting it?
Let me emphasize this. What
1
Rob,
a year.
Sure. Let me emphasize what Rob said. So currently, 6 out of 10 teachers complete PDUs. So the completion rates of PDUs is 60%. That's why we don't see an issue with the completion rates of PDUs. I mean, it's not going to be a problem, at least systemically, and we have had those completion rates at least for 6 to 10 years.
Henry,
6 out of 10.
Henry, so the average PDU done by teachers is 1.
That's right.
Because it's 1. Under the current system, you can only
And it is the main way to earn a salary increase.
Right, exactly. Right.
Knowing that only 6 out of 10 get to complete a PDU every
But you
year.
still have, but with the incentive of only doing, you can only use 1 a year.
But you can bank them, Mark.
You can bank them, yes.
But they're not base building after year 14 either, so you might be less motivated if you have more than 14 years.
So we have, last year, there were 780 people who did 2 PDUs, 237 who did 3, 87 who did 4, 30 who did 5, 7 who did 6, 2 who did 7, and 1 who did 8 last year. So, I mean, there are people, and it's not an insignificant, more than, you know.
Well, first of all, it's only Jane.
Yeah, and so that, I don't think this is necessarily a conversation about these individuals. It's a conversation about how do we create a system that can be sustainable.
Yeah, and
I think, you know, like what we heard from the governor's office is with guardrails and looking at the kind of movement that we see in other districts, their estimate was with guardrails at 20% movement, lane movement per year, it's a sustainable system. So we agree with that. So what we're trying to say is, let's get to the language that puts in the guardrails to keep it at that place. Because absent that, if it's higher than that, then I don't think that either of us are doing what we need to be doing to have.
Let's stay with that concept for a second.
Yeah.
Because that's the first specific I heard. So if there's a methodology, what I hear you saying, Susanna, of allowing PDUs to be used for lane movement in a way that would be capped at about 20% per year, that would be acceptable.
Yeah, totally.
Totally.
Yeah, totally.
And so I'm just, and I had been thinking about it, conceptualizing it, just sitting here, thinking it's in a number of PDUs that could be used. And I don't, how does the concept of a percentage,
so the way we've already
translating that to numbers?
Yeah, the way we've already talked about it is basically, when you think about it, the limiter we put in there is around, right now it's 5, right? If you did 5 PDUs a year, which nobody's going to do 5 PDUs a year, very few people have, you know, that's a limiter in itself, because you can only cash in 5 per year, no matter what, right? So that's one component of it. And I guess where we're curious is around, you know, and that 20% number too, I think that's that piece of, like, there was a lot of information that came from the governors. It was great that the governor was able to provide some of that. I mean, the way that you all were calculating it originally was you were calculating 80% of people would be moving through lanes every year, which was, of course, you know, that's not realistic. But it's, you know, and I think as we move, I guess, should we, we just want to find out what part of our current proposal is not sustainable. That's the question we really have to have, because we don't understand how, when people, if they're doing 5 per year, which we know people aren't doing.
We actually know people are doing it.
Okay, so how many was it?
How many?
Wait, one at a time.
Yes, there is.
You're changing the incentive structure, and so that changes.
But how many were doing it, Mark?
But Mark, you're going from a system where people were more dependent on PDUs to one where they're less dependent on PDUs.
Exactly.
The only way people could get base pay was to do PDUs or other evaluation. And so if you had to do a PDU but only 60% did one in a year, then I doubt that people are going to rush out and do a bunch of PDUs to move when they have a decent step that they can count on.
Then let's put that into the language. So right now, as I look at the proposal that you have, there are no limits at all around the number of PDUs, around the amount of in-service credit that can be used, that can be gathered. And as we looked at the, I thought it was really helpful that the Department of Labor put together a table from other surrounding districts to help us understand, like, how do these other systems set it up so that it can work. And so as we dug into those details, we found what some of those guardrails are. So like, for example, in Boulder, you can earn in-service credit and apply it toward a lane change only in the current year that it's earned. So that's a guardrail that says you can't carry over in-service credits from one year to the next year to apply them.
So that would mean, in that case, you would do a whole bunch in 1 year, so you could move, right?
Potentially,
Yeah.
but I think
that's your problem.
That's the same consideration around PDUs. So you could do a whole bunch in a year to get a lane change.
But you're saying that's what Boulder says. You can use it in the given year.
So what I'm saying is,
So what's the problem?
what we need to do is we need to have the conversation around what kind of guardrails are we willing to consider putting in. And if what you're telling me is that the only language that you're willing to have in the agreement is the language that you've currently provided, and that we're going to build the system off of the assumption that people will not do more and we won't write anything into it, what I would say back is, I don't think that's the way to create a fiscally sound system. And what we would like to be able to hear is where would you be willing to put in guardrails that are not currently written into
But I think we've already expressed that we've done that. We put in guardrails around how many lanes folks can move per year.
But can I just make sure I'm
Let me let Corey answer the question.
Right? So your concern has been PDUs this whole time. Folks can do a ton of PDUs and move lanes. We heard you on the 18th and put in guardrails saying folks can only use PDUs to move 1 lane per year. Right? That's what we put in there. There's already a starting point. So Susanna, if that one's not good enough for you, that's fine. That's what negotiations are about.
Sure.
Give us more choices than that, right? Or give us other suggestions. But to say we didn't put guardrails in is not true.
And the other thing that I would say, Mark, if you don't mind, is that there's another guardrail, is that you can only use PDUs to get you to the bachelor's plus 45. Then you have to get a master's or you can't move any further. You can't keep going on with PDUs. Once you have a master's, you can use PDUs to go beyond that, but you can't get you to a PhD. You'll have to go out and get a PhD. So those are also limiters on how many PDUs you can do.
Can I ask, so 2 clarifying questions, I just want to make sure. You're saying PDU lane movement, you're not limiting lane movement to 1 lane a year, you're only limiting it to 1 based on PDUs.
Right, because your concern was that folks were going to do 8 PDUs.
Right, I just wanted to make sure that's exact. So you can still do 2 lane movements if you get 15 credits and you turn in 5 PDUs. Like, because you had 2 years, you did 2 1 year and 3 another year, and that year plus you have 15 credits, you could turn that in to get 2 lane movements. I just want to make sure.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then the one problem with the limiter of so you can only move 1. It's helpful, but when you think of a whole system with over 5,000 individuals, because people are banking them, all it means is that when you turn those in, the next year, if you had you could have turned in 2. The next year you just turn them in on day 1 and then move on day 1. So it slows it down incrementally, but not significantly enough where it's for a system of how you think about a system movement, it really isn't changing the dynamic in the system. It has an incremental impact on the cost of steps and lanes, not enough to slow down movement over the length of a system.
What would you all like to see?
I guess what I would say is we'd like to take this back and try and integrate it. If there's any other feedback you'd like to provide, then we'll do the best we can.
What is the number of teachers completing 5 PDUs or more?
Sorry, my computer shut off. So I had it and then we got distracted. So, what?
Do you mind sending us that, Mark?
Yeah, of course. So, again, I'll read it so everyone has it. 1 was 2,308. 2 was 780. 3 was 237. 4 was 87. 5 was 30. 6 was 7. 7 was 2, and 8 was 1. So when you look at 5 or more in a year, it's 40 individuals. If you go 3 or more.
And is it possible to find out when with those teachers that were 5 or more? Were they teachers? Were they SSPs? Were they, and what were the PDUs they were going through? Because I wonder about whether or not, like, how the PDU was written. Because, I know that, and Suzanne, I think you did do a PDU, but I don't think the rest of anybody on your team has, right? Did you do one? Okay. So we know that there's the components of the PDU are, you have to have equal parts of study, demonstration, and reflection, right? And so within those study, demonstration, and reflection, you have to have activities that you engage in, right? As well as collaborative activities for each one of those, right? So it's not just a one and done type thing. And then from that, you generally tend to generate artifacts that what is that piece? There's also the student data component. Data is communicated in concrete terms, test scores, surveys, assessments, book studies. After examining the hard data, the researcher then looks at his or her personal experience and what he or she found to be supported by the hard data. So I guess the question is like in those 5, 6, 7, and 8, how did that happen? And I guess
I think, Rob, it's the right question to ask. So the notion of like study, demonstrate, reflect is well designed professional learning, right? It gives you a chance to learn new things, try it out in your classroom with your kids.
Yeah.
Think about it with other people, reflect on it, go back and try again. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
So we're in complete agreement there. That's the way teachers get better.
That's good. That's the first time we've heard you say that at the table.
So in that, like, we've taken a look at lots of other districts and how have they figured out the way to recognize this matters while still being able to do it in a financially sustainable way and get at some of the concerns that you're naming there, right? If you're doing 8 PDUs a year, what I hear you asking is, where's the degree of quality control, rigor, meaning? How can you make sense of all that different stuff and apply it within?
Well, and that's the key, because the shortest amount of time that you can do a PDU is over a 3-month period, right? Like as per the definition today. I get it that they're overlapping, but I'm just thinking to myself, like, how is that? What was the conditions that they went through to do that?
Yeah.
And I wonder if there is a specific program or something that had gone through those. It would be very interesting to see what kind of data we can pull from that.
Sure.
And certainly, do you mind if I finish? I'm sorry. Certainly, over the last couple of weeks, you've been going into that data. You've been looking at it. You have the data. You know what those were. I would assume you did, because otherwise I'd be wondering what have you been doing the last couple of weeks. But I just would like to know what are those conditions around that?
Jeff.
It seems to me, as the primary architect of this system in the first place, it seems to me that the anomalies are the points that we should be leaning into to try to figure out what's going on, rather than saying this is where we have to put a stake in the ground to make a guardrail, right? If it's really an anomalous situation, it seems that we have a responsibility to figure out what's going on there, and if there is an explanation for it that makes sense, we all need to know that, and if that's a legitimate thing, then putting a guardrail there might prevent something that the district actually needs to do if this is actually connected to a program. So I feel very strongly that we need to figure out what's going on with these multiple PDUs so that we can then think clearly about what realistic and practical sorts of guardrails could even be.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We can look at it more. One of the other ways we've taken, another way we've tried to answer that similar question is what have other districts done? We've heard you very clearly. You like a lot about what other districts have done in their salary table. So we've taken a look, local, nationally, what have other districts done and how have they honored professional development over the course of their salary table? They have solved for this issue of ensuring you've got quality, that it's meaningful to teachers, that they're rigorous, that it's sustainable, fiscally sustainable through bunches of different ways. So Susanna mentioned one that Boulder did. We're not implying that's the way we want to do. That's how Boulder's trying to solve for it. Adams 12 has a pretty rigorous review process of where they have a set rubric. They only approve a certain number a year. They have control on who gets to teach their version of this. Other districts say they only offer a certain number a year. So there's lots of different ways to be able to do it. What we were a little cautious of is to say, we don't want to guess what's in your head about what you feel is most important to have represented there. So hoping to have a conversation with you about, out of all those different ways to do it, what resonates with you the most, and then how can we get that captured within the language of the proposal?
So one of the things that would be helpful is to know, is DPS changing its philosophy? Because for years, DPS has said everything is about the local school and what the local school says we need to do for our community of children. And so the PDUs have been developed at individual schools because this is what makes sense for us. So is DPS saying that's no longer our philosophy? Now we'll create a handful of locally controlled PDUs? I mean, that's one option. Or is it more about embedded job PDU? Who's going to decide what's valuable to the teachers? Is it going to be the teachers, or is DPS going to tell us what the teachers should find valuable? So that would be helpful to know from our perspective of what you're thinking.
And it's very important because I think, one of the reasons I was talking to a reporter today, and they kind of asked me the question, what's one of the issues that we've had, and why did you get this far? And my response was that we've gotten this far because DPS hasn't been listening to its teachers. And so I think Pam's point is very important because if there's things that people want to do with PDUs that they see would actually influence their teaching, would actually support their teaching, then they should have the ability to do that. Certainly, it goes through the process, right, of being vetted and going through. I know there's a Jane, you know this. It's the PDU review process where every year PDUs are audited to make sure that they go through and that it is a high quality PDU in terms of from the writing of the actual proposal all the way through to the product of it, right? And looking at the student data. And so is it there that we need to put in, is that what you're thinking? Is it, we don't want to limit where teachers need to go. We need to listen to our teachers because they're the people on the ground. But at the same time, obviously, yeah, if there's an issue there, and maybe, and that's where I came back to the idea of bureaucracy and what kind of surprised me by your word. I think where your thinking comes from, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think where you were coming from was you had this idea in your mind that if we just eliminated PDUs, we'd save all this money, and we'd be able to, we'd heard that from you before, right? And we're talking about
No, I don't think that's actually what we've ever said.
Okay, good. So please correct it, because what we heard was that there was this system that governed the PDU system, and it was so cumbersome that it was costing the district so much that we wanted to take that money and change it into the savings. Good.
Yeah. No, I think what
go
we
ahead.
said was that rather than, and frankly, this is also based on teacher feedback, and I think it's really important to say, we've all heard from a lot of teachers, and one of the great things about our teachers is, we have incredibly diverse teachers, and so there's a lot that teachers share in common, and then there's diversity of belief and diversity of opinion. So I'm not speaking for teachers. we have heard from teachers, and we heard it here, in fact, that the PDU process has gotten harder. More, I heard here, bureaucratic, more hoops. And if bureaucracy is not the right word.
But we didn't use that word ever.
Yep, if hoops is the right word to talk about, like, I apologize if hoop jumping is not bureaucracy. I'm happy to call it hoop jumping if that's what we heard here at the table. So that's where that came from. And part of what we heard and the way we approached it was not saving the funding from the system to run PDUs. It was saying, let's eliminate the hoop jumping, if that's a better term, and invest it into base in the way that we approached our steps. I understand, like, we're not in agreement on that.
Yeah.
And so I get that.
And
Can I
yeah,
comment
please,
a little bit on part of what Pam shared? I think it's just really important for me to name that as I applied to become the superintendent, I did so because of my deep belief in collaboration. And I have worked, I believe, in collaboration with many of you very closely and very directly over a lot of years. And we haven't always agreed, but I think a lot of times we have. I think that we've had what I would consider to be the best kind of relationship, which is a critical friend kind of relationship, where Pam, I've been able to pick up the phone and call you and have a really honest dialogue about things that I'm not doing well, about things that I think sometimes the DCTA is not doing well, and about places where we can work collaboratively to come up with solutions, sometimes for the system and sometimes for teachers. And like, I'm not going to speak for you, but that's how I've always felt our relationship has worked. Henry, you and I have worked for many years back to pre-ProComp on work in a way that I've always considered to be incredibly collaborative. And so when you ask this question of, is there a change in philosophy around what's district-driven, what's school-driven in those places, what I would say is, I think that I would come to the table, obviously with a lot of direction from the Board of Education, my bosses, around the idea that the change that I would like to see and the change that I applied for the job on is a much more collaborative and authentic relationship with all of you. And one of the things that has frankly been the hardest for me in this process is I feel like we haven't actually had the opportunity to have the kind of conversations, not just about the contract, but about our relationship. And the very first thing I said the very first day was, so much of what's happening in these negotiations is a demonstration of the lack of trust. And my goal is absolutely to help rebuild that trust. And some of the ways that I think it's going to be really important to be able to do that is to create things like much more authentic teacher advisory groups. And so, frankly, I think it would be a really great place for us to collaborate on what does this system look like, both in the language of the contract and in how the system actually runs, with an actual advisory group with teachers and the districts to be able to do that. And so that's just a comment in terms of, like, what are the ways that we can both address what we see in the negotiations in the contract, but frankly, the contract is only as good as the relationships that we have to enact it, and that's what I would say.
Let me ask.
Yeah, I did have one point on that, John, I wanted to make sure and get out.
Okay, do that and then I'll have a question.
I did want to make sure, maybe my word hoop wasn't very, wasn't fair, and I just want to make sure that I address that. What I was referring to in tonight's about clarifying, right? Tonight's about clarifying and understanding. So what I was referring to was that we had a process in years past where if you had done a PDU, if the PDU leader had this PDU, had submitted it, and had gone through it and had been approved, then usually we did a Form C, or a Form B, it was.
Form A and Form B.
Form A and Form B. And we usually did Form B that actually went through and said, what are the changes to the process? This year, it was actually made so that everybody had to go through the long form again, and that's what I was referring to. So normally, and according to the contract, changes in the system, the PDU system, those actually go through the transition team. It was never brought to the transition team. It was never discussed with us. Once again, going back to the whole issue about not listening or talking. In addition to that, there were different data requests that were put into place where we had to, where teachers and SSPs and everybody have to input a certain amount of data to go into the system. That was never brought to the transition team per the contract. And, and now that I'm thinking about it, we probably should have filed a grievance at the time, and maybe we'll do that as we move forward now that we've identified what the issue is. But I think it's important to know that we never got to hear the why behind those things. When I talked to Mark, and he and I talked about that issue and what it was, he explained to me about how what was happening with the system and how they went through that. And I hear him, I trust him, and we went through and that made sense. But it was because those discussions about the why were finally communicated. They were not brought to us prior to that. And so that's, just so you know, that's kind of one of those things when I was referring to that piece. And I think that's fair. Debbie, I look at your face, I think it's fair to say those things should have been brought to us ahead of time.
There was a lot of room for growth around the onboarding of the PDU system and how it changed this year. There are 3 wonderful individuals that are very flexible, very collaborative, very willing to help staff navigate through a completely fresh process. As a PDU leader, we walked in, we were not given any purview of how the system changed from year to year. So like I walked in, my proposal already done. I work over the summer, that's how I prepare because I don't have time during the day to do that, much less in the evenings. I walked in, I was told your form's out, now you have to fill out another system. So if you think about the steps of how things changed from last year to this year, could have been done in a much more intentional way to where you could have onboarded and supported the teacher learning when you're giving additional time to try to sustain that learning.
Let me just give an observation, then I have a question. And the observation is, up until today, it sounded to me that there was a difference between the parties regarding PDUs, about whether or not PDUs would be recognized as a compensation building step, and the cost of PDUs. So there was a disagreement on 2 fronts. And if I'm hearing the district correctly tonight, I'm hearing that you might be willing to consider a scheme that rewards PDUs, but you still have concerns about spiraling costs or costs that are not sustainable. So if that's true, that you're willing to consider rewarding PDUs up to a point, and that point seems to be based on financial considerations. If that's true, would the association be willing to consider to have a conversation about a reward system for PDUs that has a limit on the amount of money it's going to drain out of the total compensation system and rewarding specifically PDUs? You may not be able to answer that now. You may need to talk about it. But it seems to me that this is a different conversation than we've had before.
Yeah, and John, can I just add an addendum there? I think that's a super helpful summary, and I just renamed, we haven't had this conversation yet, and so we're excited to say, let's figure this out with you. This is different than I think where we've been in the last 15 months, so super excited about that. I think the fiscal challenge and sustainability is part of it, coupled with, and how do you figure out a way to make sure they have lower variability in meaning and rigor and application without a huge bureaucratic system that changes and shifts with a bunch of approval steps? And what's the right balance? And so I think the questions are like financially sustainable, rigor without pain. Exactly. How do we do that? And that's what we're really curious to figure that out with you and get that reflected within the proposal.
So I do have a question about that, Debbie. Are you going to try and do the same test on college classes? Because so far we've heard you guys will accept college credit. So at least in my experience, I had some good PDUs and some not so good PDUs. And I had some good college classes and some not so good college classes. So are we going to do that same thing? And then how do we get into that bureaucratic hoops?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. When we've talked to other districts, how they've done it, some do actually have review processes in place. We're not actually proposing a review process there. What we have talked about for college classes, what we have talked about is saying within the ECE through 12th grade focus area, like that's the extent of the parameter that we've put in our proposal with you around university credit. Agree, there's some risk there because yeah, I'm with you. I've also had college courses that questionable in the level of how meaningful it was.
So one other thing on that, because I think that we got a different answer from Michelle last time, because we asked about that limiter on college classes and said a lot of people take classes in curriculum and instruction. And that's not necessarily, if I'm a social studies teacher, it's not necessarily about history, it's about instruction. So would those no longer be allowed? And Michelle said, no, that wasn't what you meant.
Really? Our language has ECE through 12 and curriculum and instruction in it, in the proposal.
Yeah.
So if I said something different, then that wasn't consistent with what we had in our proposal. I don't remember that.
Yeah. I mean, the idea is you're a high school social studies teacher and you want to take additional classes on world religion and you're teaching a class on that, go for it. Makes a ton of sense, right? If you want to take a class on curriculum and assessment, go for it. Makes a ton of sense. All of those things would fit within how we've currently scoped out the college credit pieces.
What about skills that might be necessary, but might be beneficial to your particular students, like taking a language course, like a second language course?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we included that too.
What about some type of mental health course that would help you better address the trauma of your children or the diversity of your children?
I think we have to figure out, right, within the focus of, like if we're talking about, Jane, like trauma-informed care for kids, like we've said that's a super high priority for the district, that we all get better at that. And so supporting teachers learning about how to be stronger trauma-informed practices, that's a win for everybody.
But you hesitated, Debbie, so what was picturing through your mind that was saying, no, that wouldn't?
I think, and this is where we have to figure out with you, in collaboration with you, the language there. When Jane just first started mental health versus mental health trauma-informed care for kids, there's a difference there, because we're really saying it's about application within an ECE through 12th grade setting, is
So,
where we're.
like a mental health course to apply to self-care that's been promoted throughout the district, that is not being directly applied to student instruction, would that be a course that would not be included?
Yeah, we haven't named that as an example course.
I guess I'm just trying to think of, like, as a school psychologist and have taken so many courses in psychology, sociology, social work, behavior, and all of those classes are applicable to me working with ECE through 12th grade students.
Yeah.
What if an English teacher were to take any of those courses to best meet their needs for ECE through 12th grade students?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, it's hard for me to say, like, it has to be relevant to, which I'm kind of hearing, the content of which you're teaching, or curriculum instruction, which seems to be, like, the deviation. But I also have to think, like, as a special service provider, everything I took was applicable, and it's what makes me an awesome school psychologist, in my opinion. And I actually would advocate for a lot of gen ed teachers to take some of those courses to better understand how to make the whole child
Jane's right. She's really good. And she's right about the
I would like to suggest, we've been here for an hour at the table, and I think it's been a good conversation. But I think there's some work that we need to do.
Yeah, and John, I need to ask, I got some information from the audience. So one of the things that I really do think that it's imperative that we find out about the teachers that are in the SSPs that are taking 4, 5, 6, those upper level, the upper amount of PDUs. Because one of the things that our audience member reminded me of is that a lot of our teachers that are, when they first come here to DPS, they're required by the consent decree to do the ELA courses. And actually, I think the reason you're seeing those higher numbers, I want to find out for sure. I want to find out for sure. I think the reason that they're doing that is because they're taking those ELA courses and they're actually earning PDU credit through those. And you can earn up to 4 PDUs through doing those ELA courses. And so what you may be seeing is the fact that teachers are actually doing the work that is required of them,
So they don't get laid off.
so they don't get laid off, so that they go through. So we just want to make sure that we look at it very closely before we start putting those big limiters on things, and let's really understand what the data is telling us.
So for, I think there's lots for you to consider after the conversation, but I'd specifically like to ask the association to consider the question I asked about some financial limitation, whatever concept that might be, and I'm looking at this from 30,000 feet or above here, just some sort of fiscal limit that the district doesn't think that they're writing a blank check on PDUs. And for the district, ask you to consider, after this conversation, what type of PDU system you would be willing to invest in, and what your financial limitations are in that system as well, and see if we can get some collaboration on that. Before we break up, just one thing. I've been here for a long time. The governor said a lot of things over the last week. There's one thing in particular that I thought he said that was right on. And that is that this process is going to end in an agreement. The challenge is the timing of that agreement. We can do it now, before a strike takes place on Monday. Up until today, there hasn't been a specific strike date. There was a strike vote. The strike vote's been taken. The teachers have expressed their seemingly overwhelming desire and willingness to So the question, the problem, the conundrum for the people at this table is, can we get this done before Monday? If we don't get it done before Monday, it doesn't mean that the question is off the table. The question will remain on the table, and it's just going to be under more difficult circumstances that we try to figure out the answer to the question. So my suggestion to everybody here is, let's work as hard as we can over the period of time that we have, because it's going to be much better for everybody here and throughout the rest of the system if we can get this done before Monday morning. That's my
Before
strong
Sunday
request for
morning.
everybody.
Yes.
Before Sunday morning, John.
Before the strike starts. Got it. Anything else before we break up?
How long do we want to break up for, and so we'll obviously be looking at some of the things that we've heard on our side and discussing those things. But what's the time frame you're looking at, John?
How much time do you think you might need? Half hour?
Yeah, I mean, we really haven't heard any, limiters from the district. We've heard concerns, we haven't heard limiters, so, we're ready when you all are.
Okay, so how much time do you folks think you need?
Can I just ask for clarification there?
Sure.
It sounded like you gave both teams an ask to come back to the table. Am I correct in that, or did I not hear you?
Yes.
Okay.
You did.
Can you just say them again so everybody can make sure that we're focused on that?
For the association, their proposal has had, the term that's been used is guardrails. And I'm asking if the association would consider an additional guardrail that would provide some fiscal stability to the PDU system.
Beyond what we already have.
Yes. And for the district, it is the willingness to reward PDUs and any specific restraints, controls that you believe needs to be there, both for the integrity of the system and for your financial considerations. Okay? All right.
Bonuses for admin this year?
And so how much time do you think you need for that?
No limits on that.
I'm sorry? Okay, all right.
Can you speak out loud for that, just so we...
Sorry, I think we need at least 30 minutes.
30 minutes?
Please make sure you just make sure that
You're doing great. Side note, I'm here in the district coach come up with I would never have it because there's only been one this year, and because I'm taking my master's classes at the same time, I have to do the job. So if I can't do that one, I'm getting the job. And it's
Was there a shot? That was nothing.
and then she never got paid
The guys, right.
Yeah, so,
eventually,
Right, it's going to be somewhere in the middle.
104.
when is that going to happen? Who knows? But hopefully it's sooner the better.
Right. Stop when they were trying to do it. Like, oh, we can set that over too.
Yeah, that's how but that's only for you.
They're like passing notes, like talking like to their partner, like asking for a Wi-Fi, like ask this.
No, not everyone. The T is still a thing. It is, but I think we've gotten to the point where everybody, you're asking everybody to do it. So, and then, sorry, I know you're going to the other room. I think I'm going to do this again. And then for at least sped teachers, they started doing the new sped teacher one, which helps. Oh yes, yeah. So,
Hey everyone, this is Alex with Unicorn Riot. They are currently taking a break right now to speak with their teams. So Denver Public School District and Denver Classroom Teachers Association are each going to meet for about 30 minutes. We might be going down and be going back up. They have been talking about professional development units, or PDUs, and those professional development units help teachers move up in pay in the schools. So there has been a lot of conversation and back and forth about that tonight, because that is a big demand of the Denver Teachers Union for those PDUs to be changed.
It's interesting, it affects me.
How you supposed to do it?
independent media organization?
Okay, cool. I'm an independent too, so I like anything independent.
Okay.
I've never applied to any party.
So if you don't mind stating your name and talk a little bit about the PDUs and how you feel about them.
Okay. My name is Paula Zendel. The PDUs are professional development units that are required. They are a required component of our licensure to maintain our licenses. And every 5 years we have to turn those in to the Colorado Department of Education. I take PDUs that are very specific to the students I teach and the content area. My feeling is that if we're going to invest time in the PDUs, we should get some type of credit for them. I don't deny that there should be a fiscally appropriate component of that, but we do have to do these for our licensure. So we should get reimbursed for that, compensated for that in some way.
For you to maintain your teacher license?
We have to do it for our teacher license, but it's also a huge time component for us. But I take very purposeful ones that are appropriate to my job. I take them for literacy intervention. I take them for additional Spanish language coursework. I am an English language acquisition teacher. I also teach Spanish. But I do them for a variety of reasons that are very purposeful to my students. There should be credit for them, in my opinion. I'm open to ideas on what exactly that credit looks like. So I look forward to both parties coming back.
And how are PDUs right now, so you don't get credit for them right now?
Well, under ProComp 2, the current contract, the PDUs are paid in some years where they give you a certain amount of money for a PDU, and then you can bank the PDUs. Unfortunately, I've had a couple of PDUs that I banked that the district never gave me credit for. That's a frustration. That was maybe a rarity, but I've heard it from other people. Some of them are purposeful. I'm at a school that really helps us focus on ones that are purposeful for our school, for our students. So I feel like mine have been very purposeful. So, and I can talk to any administrator about them. Like I said, literacy intervention, additional Spanish language coursework, equity coursework, having to do with behavioral issues, lots of things like that, student data analysis coursework. So all of these things are really beneficial things for our students, so they do pay off. So I think they're worth being paid for.
And which school do you work at?
Denver Green School.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what are your hopes? Are you participating in the strike?
Yeah. Okay. I hope not. I hope they end this today. That's my hope. My real hope is no strike. I've been hoping that the whole time.
And you hope so? So you hope an agreement is made tonight?
I think they would have to continue it into tomorrow to make it happen. I don't think it could happen in one day. But I would love to avoid a strike. I became heavily involved early in December with the whole intent of avoiding a strike. I don't want a strike. But we have the right to be compensated fairly. We have the right to earn a livable wage. So I don't think we're asking for anything outrageous. And other districts are already providing this to their teachers. We need it for our teachers.
Anything else you want to add?
I just think I think that Denver Public Schools will have a much happier teacher population, which means a much healthier student population because our retention will go down. We will be less stressed because we won't have to figure out where the money is going to come from to pay our bills. I really believe that it's in everyone's best interest to pay us fairly. So I hope it comes to a resolution. That's my hope.
Thank you for talking.
Thanks.
I just spoke with a teacher who will participate in the strike if it comes down to that, but she is still hoping that there doesn't have to be one. But she was explaining how she has done PDUs in the past where she did not end up getting credit for them. And so she is in support of the strike if an agreement is not made at the end of tonight's meeting. However, tonight's meeting might go into a second meeting tomorrow. So at the end, if there is a meeting tomorrow, at the end of that meeting, if an agreement is not made, the strike will 100% happen, even though it does seem like it will happen whether an agreement is made or not on the PDUs, because professional development units aren't the only demands that the Denver Classroom Teachers Association has for DPS.
Freeze! Everybody clap your hands.
It seems that they're trying to keep the energy up as the DCTA bargaining team and the DPS bargaining team are speaking in each of their teams, coming up with new plans and new agreements that might be able to be made tonight. DPS Superintendent Susanna Cordova said that she thought they needed at least 30 minutes to go over it. So they might be back in 30 minutes, but it might be longer than that. And thanks to everyone who is watching right now and who has supported and watched our work in the past. If you appreciate our coverage, you can go to unicornriot.ninja and click on the Support Our Work tab.
You might want to, it's an older iPhone. iPhone 5S. You found the owner. Woo-hoo!
You get a car.
Since Unicorn Riot is an independent, horizontally run collective, we, as members, get to choose what we cover, which makes our content really unique. And so if you go to our website, unicornriot.ninja, you can find all sorts of media from around the world. And locally, we just covered a vigil this past week outside the Geo Ice Detention Center, where the capacity is over 1,500, and folks there are currently dealing with a second chickenpox outbreak in 3 months. And there's still a lawsuit against that detention facility for forcing detainees to work for at most $1 a day. Some other coverage from around the world. In Greece, we have been covering political prisoners there. We just published a Political Prisoners Part 3 piece called Criminalized by Association Athens, and Unicorn Riot spoke with author Tassos Theophilou, an innocent political prisoner freed last year after serving 5 years in a Greek prison. Recent court cases involving political prisoners in Greece have borne a resemblance to J20 cases in the United States, where the U.S. government failed to provide evidence of guilt for hundreds of protesters rounded up and arrested on Trump's inauguration day in 2017. So what's really great about our organization is that we are able to provide information that shows that the same problems and the same political overreach happens in no matter what country it is. Politics seem to be the same no matter where you are in the world, with political leaders criminalizing undesirable people and people with differing views from the political class.
Can I mention a question to you since you're on break? Because I've talked with other teachers about this too. By the way, I just told the union on this too. Regardless of the PDU conversation, you should be aware that to me, the biggest thing is the district has been pushing the 30-step plan. That means 30 years before you make your money. And all of the attractive plans right now, Cherry Creek is a 15-year plan. That means you get to a higher salary sooner. And that, so all of this PDU talk, even though I do think it's beneficial, right? Probably several other teachers, I think it's beneficial, but sure, it doesn't supersede the need for having less steps.
So if you don't mind introducing
Sure.
yourself.
Yeah, this is Paula Zundel at Denver Green School, and I'm a teacher. My fellow teachers and I, many of us agree that this PDU, Professional Development Unit conversation, has value, but it does not supersede the need to have less steps in the process. That means currently the district proposal is 30 steps. It takes us way too long to get to a livable wage. DCTA proposal is 20 steps, much better. Cherry Creek's proposal is 15 steps. And Westminster's most recent proposal, I understand to be 15 steps. That means you get to a livable wage sooner. So no matter what we do with PDUs, the steps need to be 20 years or less. We should not accept anything more than that. So The PDU conversation should not supersede that. It's a part of the picture.
And do you think if an agreement is made either today or tomorrow on the PDUs, do you think there's still all these other demands that need to be met in order to not stray?
But the district should know. We've been saying 20 steps for a while. If the district came back with no more than 20 steps and a decent PDU plan, it might work out. It might. I mean, I'm not on the negotiation team, so I can't say for all of it, but it might. But if they try to say PDUs and a 30-step plan, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's not financially equivalent across districts, so it doesn't make sense.
And how much would a teacher make after 30 years? Like how much more would that be to make it considered a livable wage?
But no, you need to make the money sooner. Less steps makes it sooner. I don't want to get to 30 years. So if you look at the numbers, and I've looked at the numbers across the board, the Cherry Creek plan pays more for especially teachers in the master's plan, and now it sounds like the Westminster plan might pay more in bachelor's plan as well. Not sure about theirs. But I know the Cherry Creek plan very well, and it pays much, much more all the way through year 15, and by the time they're at 30, they're still making more money, and they have longevity bonuses. So it does not make sense to make the steps 30. That takes longer to get to a livable wage. It's not cost effective for us, for any teacher, really.
And how much, do you know how much the Cherry Creek people make once they hit the 15-year mark?
Well, I have everything about all the plans. I know them all. But I have numbers. But I don't know what their table is going to be. So, I mean, I have the numbers in my car, and I don't know what the district is going to change their table to. All I can tell you is the DCTA proposal, line item for line item, their current table is about $300 more a year than Cherry Creek. That's nothing compared to the cost of living. The cost of living in Denver is $6,342 more based on a PACE survey, PACE being PACEY survey of cost of living. So giving us $300 more is nothing. So, and I'm willing to take that. I'll take a year more than the Cherry Creek proposal in almost every lane and almost every step, all the way across the board. So the DCTA proposal, again, I've said it all the time, it's more than fair. They should accept it. The PDU negotiation, that's great. Let's fix that, make that happen, but it doesn't take away from the need to have 20 steps or less. I'm not going to a 30-step plan. It's not financially appropriate for most of our teachers. You're going to lose all those young teachers who are like, I can't afford to live in Denver. You're going to lose really almost anybody. They need to get that to that point sooner.
And what's do you know what the average time span for a teacher to be a teacher? Like, you know,
well, many teachers quit. I don't know all the numbers. Many teachers quit within 3 years. Denver Public Schools has a turnover rate of 20%. It's very high. Second highest in the metro area. That means there's too many people quitting. Schools that are paying, and it's not just about pay, but it is about pay. Schools that are paying better have, Cherry Creek has a 10% turnover rate, significantly lower. So the turnover rate does matter, and that affects kids more than anything. That teacher turnover is a huge impact to children. So if we care about students first, that turnover needs to come way down. And we need to get to a livable wage sooner. So, okay, fix the PDU thing, but you cannot make the steps, you can't have too many steps in the process. You need to have less steps to get to the most livable wage. And then you can do it like, and I haven't read the Westminster because that just came out. But in Cherry Creek, they have a 15-step plan, but then they have longevity bonuses on top of that. So that's why in my current state, I would lose money based on the district plan over a Cherry Creek plan. Somewhere between $3,000 and $6,000, depending on exact years of service. And then when you get to master's plus 15, and you have 13 years in, you're talking you could lose $10,000 over a Cherry Creek plan. Doesn't make sense for a place that is less expensive to live. So. And I have lots of numbers to support this if you want to see the numbers. I know I have all the numbers. I can share them with you. I don't want to bore anybody, but
It's like already just like all the facts.
well, I have them all. I can share them with you. I think I left my glasses in the bathroom, but I can share them with you. I have tons of numbers of this, but if you have an email, I can share it with you. Except I left my glasses, I think, in the bathroom like an idiot. I went to the bathroom, but anyway, that's okay. Here, this is Denver cost of living, and I've linked the document in. This is the cost of living difference. Denver is the highest in the metro area. So, what's your email, and I can send that to you. What's your email? Do you want to put it in? Don't do write, do share. Or you can do comment. And then I have the turnover. I have the cost of living of the current table, salary table with Cherry Creek. So the PDU does not come close to fixing the issues, but they could if they went with the union plan, they'd be fine. So continuing to fight on that plan just makes no sense to me. And we're sent, okay? And then I can give you the turnover if you want. Slow. I'll let you enter in your password because I swear to you. Oh, there's my glasses. Oh my gosh. And all of this is researched. I did it over winter break. So this has the turnover percentages. Do you want, if you start to type it, it should remember it from last time. Okay. And then I have every document. I've researched this like you would not. Here's their spending practices. You've probably seen this, but and then the last one has some of the numbers differences with Cherry Creek. Now I have to go, I'm curious, I'll go look at the Westminster ones because they're new. I don't have that data. Paula, P-A-U-L-A.
So right now we're getting some information from Paula about DPS's spending and the
cost of living,
turnover ratios,
and also comparison to Cherry Creek, Denver versus Cherry Creek, and I will do comparisons when I have the new Westminster contract in front of me. But again, the whole goal is to get to fair pay, so we don't have to fight over this. Yeah, I have a lot of debt. I've researched this more than you can possibly imagine.
Would it be better to go to school to change lanes or to do the PDU to change lanes?
What?
Would it be better to go to school to change lanes or to do the PDU to change lanes? Which one would be?
Well, the problem with, there are times when we need to do both. But here's the problem. You look at our salaries. If you're saying that my going to college to change lanes is a great idea, I love going to school. I'm a teacher. I love school. I love it. I'm not joking. But the cheapest possible bachelor's level class for a 3 credit hour class is $1,000. the cheapest master's class, $1,500. What I don't like about some of the college coursework discussions is they want everything at the master's level. Well, then I have to spend another $500 for a class that I might not need at a master's level. I could do a bachelor's level. PDU doesn't cost me that, so that's why the PDU is important.
Let me ask this. So you know how in some colleges, if you teach there, your kids can go for free, right?
Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, I'm not in that
But no, let me ask this question. Why can't that same system be put into place if we had a partner college, 2 partner colleges, to where if you're a teacher in the district, you can go for free?
It would be nice if teachers got a less expensive cost for
like
college.
You said, we're educators. We
Yeah.
want to continue to educate.
I wish, and that's why I did just tell Rob Gould, and I'm texting Henry Roman and Rob Gould, bachelor's credit hours could be just as beneficial as master's credit hours. So we should be able to be recognized for appropriate master's level classes, appropriate bachelor's level classes, and appropriate PDU. And I'm very intentional with that I take. I'm not taking anything that's basket weaving, okay? I'm taking serious coursework. But sometimes I take bachelor's level classes because they're cheaper. And so yes, would it be nice if the university rewarded that? I'd be all over it.
So how does IBM do it then with Northwestern? Because they have a program. How does IBM do it with Northwestern? Because they have a program where they send all their employees to school for
IBM
free.
International Business Machines?
Yeah.
I worked for them for 13 years. That's a totally different world. But in IBM,
Is it though?
it is a different world. Well, because they negotiate education differently. And in the world of IBM, if I needed to take coursework, it was paid for. And I worked there. Well, here, it's about priorities, right? And so the district has, in the past 10 years, spent more money in administration than they have in teachers. So we don't get those priorities. And when it's interesting you mentioned the IBM one, because I worked for IBM and I took several courses. I never had to pay for the courses that I took with IBM. And yeah, and they helped me at my job. They were purposeful to my job. And I even could go to them and say, I think I really need this. And they'd say, you know what, we agree with you. I mean, I never would bring forth something that was a waste of my time because I didn't have time for it. I didn't want to waste it, right? So, and I think most people don't want to waste our time, right? So I don't know why, your point is valid. I don't know why corporations, and you could say it's this huge profit margin, but I don't even know if that's always true. I don't know why, but corporations pay for employees' ongoing education, and schools don't pay for teachers' ongoing education, which is why PDUs are more cost effective for us, because we don't have to spend $1,000 to do a PDU. It is a hang. At our current salary, how do we justify that? At our current salary, we can't justify.
What I'm saying is you walk away when there might be other ways to work it out. Yeah.
I mean, that's a part of the reason why the steps have to be 20 steps or less. You need to get to a higher salary sooner. If you want to add longevity bonuses like Cherry Creek is doing, add the longevity bonuses after that. But get us there sooner so we can afford to live in Denver. I mean, it's so expensive here.
I wonder if that building, what was his name? Who's one of our senators? Gardner. He passed a bill, $10,000 for businesses to send to pay for their employees to go to school, whatever. I wonder if that would apply to us, and if we could, like if it could be working to the budget, because if so, then we all have $10,000 already.
Wouldn't it be that? Well,
it's already passed.
I'm thinking about adding a special education endorsement because I have always preferred to work with students who are really struggling. That's who I want to work with. I love English language learners. That's my main focus right now. And I thought I would like to have both, but it's going to cost me another $5,000, and that's at the cheapest level of class coursework to get to that special ed credential. And that's if they allow me to take it at a bachelor's level. If they make me take it at a master's level, it's $7,500. So that's the numbers you're talking about, just so you can see. I sent this to you, but you can see. This is with the cost of living difference. This is without, but I sent it to you. So this is like real tangible money, and it's all throughout. What DPS did is they put it all in the bachelor's length, which I have no problem with them recognizing that, but they did that because 38% of their teachers are in the bachelor's, 4% are in the PhD, and 58% are in that middle zone that they're not paying very well. So it's a very affordable plan for DPS, not affordable for most of us in that middle zone. So they can talk about the attractive salaries a lot, and now it sounds like Westminster has surpassed them in the bachelor's length, so they need to wake up. Right? Would you agree? What do you teach? What do you teach? Social studies, yeah.
Currency conversions and the new currencies and things of that nature. I wonder if there's like a school that actually accepts like a different type of currency for their education. I wonder if there's anything like that going on. See, for me, to avoid everything that everybody's talking about for the good of the district, for the good of the state, it would be smart to like what are options out there that are sustainable and that can be sustainable. We don't have to really stay in the same box, that we've been in. Because if we do, we're going to be back here 15 years from now instead of 20, instead of 25. You see what I'm saying? We might even be back 10 years from now. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity.
No, I agree with you. I love that you're bringing up the fact that why don't we do like corporations do? I can't even answer that question. I mean, the only way I can answer that, like I said, legitimately, as when I worked for a corporation, I didn't pay for any of my school coursework that was necessary for my job, none of it. But as a teacher, making less money, I have to pay for all of that coursework, which is why we need to have credit for professional development units, because they don't cost us so much, and they're still our work time, and they're still beneficial. Yeah, the main thing is they spent too much money in administration in the last 10 years. That's the biggest issue. I mean, did Cherry Creek, when they changed their salary tables, did Cherry Creek go crying up to the state, please give us more money, we can't pay our teachers? No, they didn't do that. Or did their teachers threaten to strike? No, their teachers didn't threaten to strike. Like, does anybody want to deal with a strike? I do not. The worst. The worst.
ECE is going to be hurt like that.
If what?
If the ECE teachers can't go in and they're talking about closing ECE, I definitely want to go.
That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Those are the things.
They just need to fix this, and teachers need to be a higher priority, and they are in other districts. They're not here. I didn't hear your name. I'm Paula.
Paula?
Yes.
Jathan.
Jathan.
Like Nathan J. Yep.
Right. Where do you teach?
Northeast.
Northeast, and that's where.
Northeast, yeah.
And that's
even
where
further.
there's so many teachers quitting, right? Just tons of teachers. Not as many there.
It's.
I went to
a
the
fair
Northeast
amount.
community.
It's a fair amount,
Yeah.
but it's not a lot. It depends. It depends
Were you
on
at
which
the
one
Northeast
you're at.
community meeting like a couple months? It was like kind of heartbreaking. These kids were talking about losing all their students, and because I'm in the southeast part.
Yeah. Has it been 30 minutes? Thank goodness.
Nice to talk to you.
Nice talking to you too.
Where's the district? Where's the district? Where's the district? Where's the district? Give me clockwise. The district has asked for 20 more minutes.
All right, make it happen. Make it happen.
Faith, do you want fries? Go, Faith.
No, she was just saying thanks for getting them too. I don't think she wants.
I know, we were like...
Yeah.
No.
Speaking a little bit about why you're here. I'm kind of stuck right here. And I'm live streaming right now. Introducing yourself and saying why you're here and what school you go to.
I'm Samantha Mendoza. I'm a senior at George Washington High School, and I really just came to learn more about the whole issue, wanting to support our teachers, and actually be informed and get involved in wanting to understand everything that's going on. So,
and what are your thoughts so far tonight?
I think it's not going anywhere. I think it's hard for the teachers. Obviously, they're very upset, and nobody can blame them. But I think we're definitely holding the teachers to a higher standard than we are holding the district. So I think we need to have the same expectations for both teams and really want to understand and empathize with both sides. The teachers do have a lot to lose, and I think that's something that really needs to be emphasized.
And if the strike does end up happening on Monday, how will that affect you?
So we're told to still go to school because the more teachers or the more students that go to school, the harder it will be for the subs and the harder it will be for the administration to keep them open. But I think it's going to be really frustrating just to have 8 hours of school and not be able to do anything productive. So
even though, if most of your teachers don't show up and you have subs, are you still in support of the strike, even if it's potentially harming your education?
I think definitely. I think our teachers deserve better than this, and I think that it's hard for everyone. I know a lot of organizations locally, like the Boys and Girls Club, are also struggling a lot with this, and there's a lot of effects that we don't see. And so I think it's very hard, but I also think it's not right for us to deny them the right to a fair wage, a living wage. So.
Is there anything else you want to say?
No teachers.
Good job. We just heard from a student who said even if the strikes do happen on Monday, she's still in support of them, even though she'll be going to school with potentially none of her teachers there. They'll most likely have a lot of substitutes showing up on Monday if the strike happens. But she said even though it could potentially, lessen the amount of days at school, lessen the amount she might learn at school, she still supports them because she thinks they deserve a livable wage.
Real quick announcement. So the door, it needs to be clear at all times. It's a fire hazard if you're blocking the door. So please make sure you're not that unlucky teacher that is standing at the door. I'm not going to call out any educators right now, but
I called dibs on fire extinguisher.
Thank you.
And
super another chance.
Some of you will know this. Goes like this. These boots are made for walking. That's just what they'll do. If you don't give us fair pay. are gonna walk all over you. Gotta do this. Ready, and here we go.
Boots are made for walking. That's just what they'll do. If you don't give us fair pay, these boots are gonna walk all over you. Okay, that's much better.
Can you hand me that? Can you hand me the teacher answer? It's right there, yeah.
I would say Jenny.
No problem. I see. Can you give me that paper? Back here. She's good too. Do you see too at all? Yes. Oh, here's the other one.
Alright, that's good. No, yeah! Okay, so we have to do perk testing for every single subject, except for social studies, and that's my favorite subject.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Denver Classes teacher anthem!
Working with kids all day. We are here to tell the district that they must give us fair pay. If their choice is to refuse us, sadly we lose our seats. Since they do not value teachers, we will hit the street. Sending the alarm, DCTA members, we are strong. Moving our voice, the students are our choice. Value us and give fair pay. We're the Denver classroom teachers, working with kids all day. We are here to tell the district that they must give us fair pay. If their choice is to refuse us, sadly we'll leave our seats. Since they do not value teachers, we will hit the street.
His diet is often pretty much Cheerios and steak.
Boots are made for walking. That's just what they'll do. If you don't give us fair pay, these boots will walk all over you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, did you get this?
Put the nickel on the table.
What is somebody wrote in the Grace book last year? Debbie Hardy is she's the chief of Grace book. Somebody just tagged
Can't get mine, sorry. Thank you. Education is alright.
That is why we have to fight.
Pause. That was really weak for a bunch of teachers. Come on, y'all. I know we're tired, but we got this. Education is alright.
That is why we have to fight.
Education is alright.
That is why we have to fight.
Education is alright.
That is why we have to fight.
Education is alright.
That is why we have to fight.
Education is Oh shoot! On your seat!
Okay.
You know it's real. On your feet, educators! They're gonna put up the salary schedule. What do we want? What's so different this thing? Yesterday! Wow! Fair pay! When did we want it? Yesterday! What do we want? Fair pay! When did we want it? Yesterday! What do we want? Fair pay! When did we want it? Yesterday! What do we want? Fair pay! When did we want it? Yesterday! What do we want? Fair pay! When did we want it? Yesterday! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! These unfair wages got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! These unfair wages got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! These unfair wages got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! These unfair wages got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! These unfair wages got to go! Hey, hey! If they won't pay us, shut it down. If they won't pay us, shut it down. If they don't pay us, shut it down. If they don't pay us, shut it down. If they won't pay us, shut it down. If they don't 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 pay us, shut it down.
We're closer.
That hurts so bad. All right.
I'm walking, dude. Yeah.
We'll send pictures. Let's go and we'll give them talking.
Just scoot them all that way. There you go. Thank you.
First time anybody wanted to run
Thank you, folks. Okay. Caucuses always take a little bit longer than we anticipate. I had a chance to talk with a couple of members of the association team, and I don't want to speak for you, Rob, but maybe why don't you just share what you and I all about. As far as the terms of the question I asked him.
So, I mean, what you asked was about limiters and whether or not, what would we be willing to look at, and I think what we're, where we are, we sat, we talked a little bit in the other room. We're still curious about the data that we requested in terms of like, what are the makeups of those PDUs and how it works. Hopefully you have some information on that. And we also, I guess, where our position is we're not really clear on what the district would like to see. Because as we were looking at the data that you provided for us, Mark, that you sent us over, within that table, it looks like you've got 30 people that did 5, 7 people that did 6, 2 people that did 7, and 1 person that did 8. So that means there's under our proposal, that means we have 40 people this year that would actually be able to move one lane. And so with PDUs. So then when you think about how many teachers we have in DPS, we calculated out that it's less than 1% of the teachers under our proposal, which is 0.00018% of teachers would be able to move under our current system. And then, of course, and then under your system, nobody would. But so I think we're wondering is what is, we'd like more information.
I mean, you're saying 1 year snapshot versus banked and then moving forward. Like, so when we were doing our estimate, if you look at 2 PDUs a year, that means, let's say if people did 2 PDUs a year, okay, or if you even say 1, let's say we go to where we are currently, 1 on average a year, that means 20% of the workforce is moving every year, because 5, 20%. So if you do more than that, because if you do every 5 years, a person's moving, right?
Okay.
So that means every 20% of the people in a given year are moving.
So if we allow 5 per year, you're saying, then we would fit underneath that 20%.
No, that's not what I said.
Oh, okay.
What I said was if you assume they only do 1 per year, not that there's a limit, if you assume that, then you're saying that it is 20% of the workforce is moving a lane each year. That doesn't include in-service or credits either.
But Mark, is that assuming that everyone does 1 PDU a year? Is that
on average.
It's also not considering the stops in there before the masters.
That
yeah, no, that's right.
So you have people that are stuck as well.
And I think you're not taking into consideration our current rate of completion, which is 60%. So
no, but even with that, there are 2 different factors there. One is yes, 60% of people, 65% from the data last year do a PDU. But of the entire population, the average is 1 PDU because there are people doing more than 1. So the average is 1 per year under the current system. And you only are incentivized to do 1 per year because that's all you can get a base builder on. And if you're above 14 years, then you only get it as a cash payment. So there's different incentives when you move there. So if you assume, on average, all the DCTA member or all the teachers do 1 per year, that means 20% of teachers are moving a year. When you then add in what other districts have around credit lanes and where those happen, that's about 10 to 15%. And then you have in-service as well on top of that. So you get to about a 30-40% lane movement. What we also, I think, is something that's worth considering is you change the incentives. Let's say you even go to 1.5 PDUs a year on average. Not that everyone does 1, but on average you get the average is 1.5. That accelerates the lane movement closer to 30 to 35% a year of teachers are moving each year. So that's where the concerns are.
I think another way of saying this is, what we want to make sure that we do is we build a system that can account for the kind of movement that we know is sustainable. And so what Mark is describing is not necessarily what would happen, but what could happen. And we need to be able to build a system that doesn't just support what does happen, but puts limits on what could happen so that what does happen is sustainable.
as long as we ground ourselves in what is happening, and right, I mean,
But it's very different. So like as Mike named,
no, I understand worst case scenario. I get that.
No, I'm not even talking worst case scenario. The motivations are different. So currently, you can only get paid for one a year, and so the reason to do them up to year 14, the reason to do them is to get the base builder in a year. And totally agree. Not everybody does it. Some people do significantly more. And within the system that we have currently, the behavior is driven by the way the system rewards behavior. And in any system, there are people who use the system fully to maximize the rewards, and there are people who don't. And so what we just want to make sure is, as we're thinking about building a system, that we build it in a way that is sustainable, both for the people who don't fully use the system and for people who do fully use the system. Okay.
Michelle, you have something on the screen for us.
I apparently need a PDU in working these things. So thank you for your patience.
That was a good one.
Sorry.
Points for effort.
Sorry, they're not stapled. It's 3 pages. We were working pretty quickly, trying to get this back to you. I'll let you pass that around, and then I'll tell you what we're coming back with that we hope is responsive to a couple things that we've talked about over the last couple weeks. So this is the proposal we've had, but we tried to do some pretty dramatic changes to what you saw from our last proposal. And in the spirit of moving forward this conversation as quickly as possible in recognition of our limited time, we wanted to, like I said, respond to 2 key things that we've heard from you. So like you said, we are here tonight to show you that we are listening. So we brought you some language on PDUs, and we brought you some language around trying to be responsive to what you've asked for, to a schedule that looks more like other districts. I've heard you say that a number of times, and so we took that back, and we pushed ourselves on this to say, if we're going to talk about incorporating PDUs into this, let's think about this credit-based system as a whole and what that might look like. So just to, yeah, let me, the language is not so important as the visual. So to be clear, there was no new language on that first page, so that's all the same. What is new is this here. You know, as before, we had multiple ways to move across the lanes, but the lanes weren't necessarily tied to levels of educational credit, similar to what you might see in other districts. And so what we're bringing tonight is something that is adding in a couple of your requests on more lanes connected to educational credits. We now have the BA plus 45 lane in here, the same as your proposal, that the BA 45 lane is the same as the master's. We've added in the MA plus 60 lane as well. And what we've tried to do is marry, I think, some of the things that we love about your proposal and some of the things that we were pretty excited about in our proposal. And specifically to build a salary schedule where you could still have what we've been calling our longevity lane. So if you work 10 years in DPS classrooms, you get the benefit of a full lane change. Something that we've never seen in other districts and something that we think is exciting, right? Because our biggest goal here is to retain people to stay in DPS. So we want to do something different than the other district. Let's take what works from other districts, but let's also do something different here that actually works to keep all of you in the classroom in DPS. So the way that we've built it here is to say there's different ways to earn credits to move you across these lanes. There's your standard university credits like you might expect. And we've got these defined below here. This is what we've had before, but as we talked about, it's really expansive to say if there's any connection to the work that you're doing. It's in your ECE to 12 content area. It's any certification, license, or specialist in the ECE 12 focus area. That's all consistent with what we had before, but there are more lanes that you can use those things to drive you across. Like I said, the longevity is still there. But the way the longevity would work is it'd be the equivalent of 30 credits. So say you are you have your bachelor's, you've decided the moving on to the master's is not for you, but you spend 10 years in DPS classrooms, you move to the BA plus 20 lane. Or you'd be in the BA plus 20 lane, but you would have 30 credits accumulated. So you would only be 15 credits away from the master's lane. So you can get to the master's lane through your commitment to DPS classrooms in 10 years and 15 credits. So that another way you can get to the master's lane would be obviously to pursue traditional masters. That would also take you from BA to BA plus 20 to the master's. Or you could use professional, if you decide, I also don't want to get a master's, but I would like to get more credits. We've tried to respond to flesh out what we think professional development units could look like to help you move towards those farther lanes as well. So we're trying to keep the spirit of ProComp of multiple ways to grow your pay through commitment to the classroom, through retention, through advanced degrees, through college-based credits, and through PDUs. Multiple ways to move across the lanes for what fits for you and what makes sense for your practice. We did appreciate the guardrail that you had set, and so we applied that same rule here about the movement past lane C, the master's lane, would require a master's, so that was trying to match what you had in your proposal, which I think makes some sense as an appropriate guardrail. Before I kind of go into the professional development credits, which I'll probably turn it over to Debbie and Susanna, can I answer more questions about that?
So you said a course of study would be at least 60 hours outside of the paid school day?
So let me have Debbie walk through the language that's here, and let me move it down so folks in the audience can see it.
Sure. So what we took a look at is a bunch of other districts. How have they figured out the way to balance the notion of making it meaningful, rigorous, financially sustainable, all those things. And there's a bunch of different levers you can pull. You can cap the number that people are eligible to participate in. You can do a super tight review on what qualifies. You can set a high number of hours. You can limit what you can do year over year or within a year. You can say only certain people are eligible to teach or offer these courses. You can limit it to which lanes you're allowed to move between. So we looked across a bunch of different ways and said, which ones honor what we've had to date in PDUs and helps us solve for some of the challenges that we named before the last caucus.
But how would you measure that?
Measure the what?
The 60 hours. How would you determine if there was actually 60 hours for that?
Yeah, so let's go through, and I think a lot of this is like a dialogue that we want to have with you based on the draft we have here. So some of the language you'll see here is direct from what we have right now around professional development units. Again, honoring this notion of action research within their classrooms, SSPs with their students, study, demonstrate, and reflect. We've put in here, it's a course of study of at least 60 hours outside of the paid school day with expectations for time during instructional time, but no restrictions or expectations on what those hours necessarily look like. So I think, like simply, it would be in the PDU approval process, you would list what are your hours outside of the school day in the approval process. What's your course of study, essentially, outside the school day. We've talked about the Action Research Project focusing really on our
greatest challenge for Denver Public Schools over the next 5 years, which is what can we do to more aggressively close our opportunity gaps that we have with our kids. So topics within that area. We've talked about PDUs here being available for optional learning opportunities. If something is required for your job, that should be, as in the master agreement, what we have, that's extra pay, that we provide extra pay if something's required. ELA is unique, and so for ELA, we've talked here about our ELA courses. We would create credits that you could move and apply still. You could picture what Michelle had. You could still apply those credits sideways, but that wouldn't be an additional PDU on top of that. You'd just be earning those credits to be able to apply and move sideways on the table. We've talked about, and this is, Susanna referenced this a little bit, and totally hear Pam's point. The partnership around PDUs is super important. And so Susanna referenced this idea of a superintendent teacher advisory committee. We see this as being a very robust advisory committee to the superintendent. One of the things, taking a look at policy, taking a look at practice, a bunch of the challenges that we have that we need to hear teacher voice on. More deliberately hear teacher voice. That committee would also be the committee that would help us review and provide input on what PDUs are approved. So we'd have teacher review of the PDUs going forward. Some courses of study might be offered for PDU or for university credit. So one of the guardrails, so to speak, from the earlier conversation would be it's for credit or for a PDU, not both. You would earn 1 PDU a year. PDU is not done concurrently, so a little bit of what we talked about also before caucus. And the earning of PDUs to be applied for lane movement, which is what Michelle captured earlier about the number of PDUs, how many credits it equals to be able to move sideways. And so again, this is our take at saying, how do we honor what we've been able to do together that's best about PDUs? How can we take what we can learn from a bunch of other districts about how they do this? And how do we then apply it within our context? And with, excited to hear your feedback.
I think one of the things I was kind of missing in that description was looking at how we currently do PDUs and identifying where some of the strengths and maybe some of the concerns were. I didn't hear that. I heard what everyone else is doing and what is out there and how to pull different levers. I was curious in terms of the rigor. There's currently a system of looking at rigor. Do you have any information on that? Are you aware of how that happens? When you talk about an advisory committee for reviewing every single PDU, do you know how many PDUs come through on an annual basis? Are you proposing limiting those? Or, are we creating a new committee, hiring more people to create this review process? Does that make sense?
Yeah. We've got to do some of that thinking jointly with you. We don't have all the answers in that area. What we care most about is that there's teacher voice in the input and review of PDUs going forward as a key component there. And then how do you put in some kind of expectations to ensure that there is more consistency in the rigor of the PDUs?
So you're saying that you'd rather, you're moving this away from site-based input and management to district level. So you would be reviewing every single PDU that would come before you.
Yeah, that's what this is the reason for the conversation. How could we take these ideas and operationalize them and make them work? And curious your thoughts on how we could best do that.
I have some questions about language and details here. So to me, the words course of study means several classes or courses that lead up to a diploma or a diploma or movement to a next level. So I'm not sure that that's the term that you intended.
It's not the concept we intended.
Right. And so I just wanted to point that out. Then at the bottom you see that it's equivalent to a 3-semester-hour course, but then further up in the second point there, you're saying that there has to be at least 60 hours outside of the paid school day. And above that you say that it's job embedded. So these three things I'm having a hard time reconciling. A university course is 45 hours of class time, but there's no requirement for homework. Right? There's no 60-hour requirement stipulated for any university class I've ever taken. It's just 45 hours of class time.
Well, I've never taken a university class where there's not some expectation for work outside of the 45 hours
But
of class.
did they ever say 60
how many hours you had
Has
to
anybody
take.
ever said that there's 60 hours? Right, of course you know you're going to do homework, but the idea that there has to be 60 hours of outside of the job day work, that just doesn't seem like a realistic connection to this idea of a 3 credit hour university course.
You don't think the 16 hours of homework is more productive?
I'm not sure that requiring, I mean, I don't understand how you can comprehensively say that there's always going to be X number of hours of homework required for a
Yeah,
class. That's the course instructor's
We're just trying to match
discretion,
up,
right?
making those two the equivalent, the best we can.
Yeah, I mean, 45
So,
hours.
I tell you what, we want to make sure, and we definitely want to maximize the time that we have tonight because it's after 8 o'clock and we just want to make sure that we continue. So we're just going to give you some quick feedback and then we're going to take this back. And I think like Jeff's already kind of alluded to the part there about the 60 hours. It does, I think the other part I want to make sure and bring up around that is it does go against our current agreement, and where our current agreement talks about the PDU can be during the workday. And there's also things that you need to remember about a PDU around that, which are those skills and demonstration components that I mentioned earlier, the study, the demonstration, the reflection components. You have to do activities, but you also have to collaborate with your with your peers on that. So now you're saying that we have to not only the work that we do during the school day, now we're going to have to go and collaborate outside of the school day as well for our study component, our demonstration component, and our reflection component. Once again, it goes against our current agreement. The next thing we wanted to make sure and come down here and talk about, you have in here a BA20. If you go back up to that, Michelle. That BA20, if we're hearing you right, then what you're saying is it will take you 7 years to get to that second column if you're only utilizing PDUs through that. Because, yeah, I mean, it's so at least 7 years to get there. That's a very long time for people to wait for a lane movement. And let's this next portion down here about how you have that required professional development will be incented through extra pay and not eligible for PDU. So you all have committed to this school-based budgeting format that doesn't, and we have our issues with school-based budgeting. But one of the issues that we have is that schools always have to make a choice. Do they pay for their teachers to go to this outside professional development, or do they pay for a paraprofessional in the classroom? Or do they pay to have Kleenex in the classroom? Or do they pay to have crayons and pencils? These are things that you're asking schools and teachers. You're actually restricting even further those school-based budgets. And so, some quick feedback on that. Yeah, and yeah, they don't get any movement for doing that either. Right? It's.
I mean, they get paid.
But Susanna, please listen, okay? Please listen. Most of the teachers that go to those after-school things, they don't get paid. They don't get paid because the schools don't put the money in their school budget because you don't give enough money in the school budgets.
Right now, our current agreement requires.
I agree. I think we should get rid of school-based budgeting. I agree.
Well, that's not what I said. What I said was, currently, required professional development has the stipulation that it be paid. And what we are doing is taking that same requirement that's in the master agreement and bringing it.
Well, I'm sure when we're in caucus, I'm sure you can talk to some of these teachers that are here tonight, and they can tell you about how often they get paid for that. You know, I'm sure they'll.
Seems like we have a
let's go down to the Superintendent Teacher Advisory Committee. One of the things that you talked about earlier tonight was making sure that we have less bureaucracy, but now you're creating an entirely new, totally new committee, which, mind you, called STAC. Yeah, Stack It Up. But I think, like, I guess the question in my mind is, how is this different from the Instructional Issues Council that we just got rid of in our master agreement? Susanna, you were in charge of the Instructional Issues Council for some time, am I correct? And I remember one of the reasons why we abandoned that council was because it never met. And there was never anything that happened because of it. So teachers would bring their issues to you and to that council, and people just didn't feel like it was ever, their needs were ever addressed. Pam, is there, I mean, am I missing something?
I mean, we love to keep things in the contract. We gave it up on this one because of how useless it was. Rarely met. When it did, Henry had a hard time finding teachers who were willing to be appointed to it because the teachers who had been said it's a waste of my time and it's useless. That the person from the district would come and lecture the teachers there. Nobody worked on anything again. And that this committee would report to the superintendent and then the superintendent would make the final decision. It just doesn't fly. That is just not okay in the way that we work out things.
And just to kind of round it out here is, you have the idea that only one PDU can be earned per year. PDUs cannot be done concurrently, and you're talking about PDUs like one PDU cannot be done at the same time as another PDU. We've already established the fact that because of the consent decree and DPS, there are teachers that have to take multiple PDUs in 1 year. And so there's, I mean, in that sense, what you've provided for us today doesn't address that.
Yeah, just as a clarification, we're actually saying we would treat ELA classes completely differently, and they would earn the equivalent of credit, just like university classes wouldn't have to. Like right now, we already offer free university credit for ELA classes, or you can take it through the district offered. What this is saying is taking an ELA class would be the equivalent of earning graduate credit. You could take the graduate credit, or you could just take DPS credit in the equivalent of graduate credit.
Do the teachers have to pay for that credit?
No, not now and not in the future.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so why would they take DPS C? Credit C. Why would they take DPS credit C?
I'm not actually sure. Like, we offer graduate credit paid for all of our ELA classes already. Yeah. No, we pay for that.
Okay. Has anybody in here had to pay for it? Okay, a few of us have. One of us have. Well, we'll figure that whole situation out. We'll take this back. We don't want to spend. These are just preliminary things about it.
Sure.
We're going to take this back. We'll look at it. I can tell you right now, we're not ready to sign this. So. We'll take it back and look at it. Thank you.
Yeah, before we break, the one thing that I would like to say is, so Pam, I definitely hear what you're saying about Instructional Issues Council. I did participate in Instructional Issues Council for many years. I would say that there were some years when it was much more productive and some years when it was much less productive. I can name, like, off the top of my head something that was very productive for me. At an Instructional Issues Council session when we were adopting new social studies curriculum, and we had to do translations internally because materials weren't available in Spanish. It was an Instructional Issues Council member who brought to my attention how the translations looked in Spanish and the subpar quality of what those were, so that we actually could make changes and adjustments to how we do that. So it wasn't always as productive, I think, as we'd like it to be. And part of the reason, from our perspective, why we thought it was important to move away from an Instructional Issues kind of generic council was so that we could have specific working groups around issues that we know were high priority issues with our teachers. I just want to reiterate again, if we haven't captured the idea in the right way here, the spirit of what we're trying to say that we want to do is I want to be in a place where I can have a collaborative relationship with teachers, and I want to be able to codify that in the language. If this language isn't capturing that, I'd be more than happy to hear how you would counter that so that we can get at the spirit of how is it that we create the kind of relationship that is collaborative, that I think you are seeking, and that I certainly am as well.
He speaks for us.
Thank you. Everybody, if you mind just letting us out so we can get back to work.
Rob, any idea on time?
Let's shoot for 30 and we'll try to go from there. And
safety and us. We found the owner of property. Oh, good.
For what? Yeah, it's okay.
Hi everyone, this is Alex with Unicorn Riot. I'm still here in Denver, Colorado at the second bargaining meeting between Denver Public School District and the Denver Classroom Teachers Association since the Denver Classroom Teachers Association voted to strike. During this second meeting, they have been going over professional development units, which the more units you get, increase your pay. And a big demand for the teachers is that they do not make a living wage. DPS just explained a new offer. However, Denver Classroom Teachers Association, which is the teacher union in Denver, said they will not sign it how it is right now. They're breaking for a second time tonight to go over this proposal in further detail. Because of how the meeting is going, it does seem like the strike on Monday is definitely going to be happening. However, even if an agreement is made tonight or tomorrow, if there is a meeting tomorrow, there are still many more demands on top of professional development units that the teachers are asking for. So even if there is an agreement made, it does seem like there is going to still be a strike this coming Monday. Thank you all for watching. This is a very long stream. This meeting is going longer than was anticipated. If you appreciate our coverage, you can go to unicornriot.ninja and click on our Support Our Work tab. And during this break, feel free to take a look at our website and see all of our recent content.
Thank you so much. Hey, take it easy. Yeah, you bet. Thanks. Good luck.
Some recent coverage that you can take a look at is our valve turners article. Valve turners shut down an Enbridge oil pipeline, or multiple pipelines in Minnesota. 4 people calling themselves the 4 necessity valve turners shut down Enbridge's Line 3 and Line 4 tar sands oil pipeline in Minnesota, citing imminent and irreversible damage being done to the planet. The activists entered pipeline service locations and advised Enbridge of their intention to stop the flow of oil by shutting down the safety valves. Enbridge eventually manually shut down both the Line 3 and 4 tar sands pipelines. The 4 necessity valve turners, Allison Pullman, Brenna Cusson-Anglada, Michelle Nar-Obed, and Daniel Yildirim, documented their action in a live feed filled with prayer, song, and an encounter with law enforcement, with one officer who came on them with their gun drawn. If you want to read more about the valve turners, you can go to our website, unicornriot.ninja. There are still over 100 people here tonight. There are children, not just students who are here in support of the teachers, but also teachers' children are here tonight as well.
Ever worked in more ridiculous conditions than this before? Brutal. Oops.
You're good. Yeah.
Hi, Mom. Sorry about that, Mom. Who do you work for?
I'm a journalist with Unicorn Riot.
Say again?
Unicorn Riot.
Okay.
We're an independent media organization.
Here in Denver? Based in Denver or what?
All over the country, kind of based in Minneapolis, but also Denver.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I go. You go. This side.
It's not looking very good.
That side. You cancel. Everybody ready? My side. What is wrong with our proposal?
Nothing's wrong with our proposal.
15 months and you bring questions.
15 months we bring solutions.
What is wrong with our proposal?
Nothing's wrong with our proposal.
15 months and you bring questions.
15 months we bring solutions.
What is wrong with our proposal?
Nothing's wrong with our proposal.
15 months and you bring questions.
15 months we bring solutions.
DCTA.
Oh, there you go. You're tired. You're tired, sis. Go home. Stay light. Stay light.
Thank you.
So some interesting facts about Denver Public Schools spending practices. Between 2009 and 2018, DPS increased expenditures for business services by 186%. DPS increased instructional support expenditures by 115%. DPS increased general administration expenditures by 95%. DPS increased instructional services, meaning teacher and specialized service providers, expenditures by only 38%. So that is why a main demand for the Denver teachers is to have a livable wage, because as the contract is now, if they aren't able to do enough professional development units, which is a lot of extra time and energy outside of school hours on top of all the at-home hours teachers do in preparation for school. If they're not able to do enough professional development hours, then they aren't able to get pay increases. Another demand has to do with the teacher turnover rate because of the payments not being at a livable wage and many other reasons. There is a high turnover rate in Denver Public Schools. The turnover rate for the 2017-2018 year for Denver County was over 20%. And that is the second highest in the metro area. It's second to Adams and Arapahoe County, which is at 26% turnover rate. And as one of the teachers who I interviewed earlier, she said that turnover rate is very harmful to students. And because they don't have the same teachers there, the same familiar faces, the people who they feel comfortable and safe around. If you're seeing new faces all the time in your school, that can affect your ability to learn and feel safe in your school.
I have a question if you don't mind. Why do you write a lot at the start? I thought rather the first thing and I said maybe this is start chanting and just like I don't know, analyzing the problematics.
And in Denver, with the rates of housing going up and the amount of people having to move out of Denver or forced to live on the streets of Denver because housing is just too expensive. The teachers, there are many teachers at Denver Public Schools who can't even afford to live in Denver because it's so expensive. And we have covered a lot of stories about the unhoused population here in Denver. Our most recent story highlights the fact that Denver paid a cleanup company $400,000 to help in cleanups of people living on the streets, to help in moving people along and pushing them out of Denver. When these sweeps happen, police and public works officials, along with cleanup company and help from inmate labor as well, they tell people on the streets that they need to move, and they can grab any belongings that they can carry at that time. Any other belongings will either be destroyed or placed in a storage facility for up to 30 days. A lot of folks are still here tonight. A few dozen have left during this second break, but there's still at least 75 people here waiting for the Denver Public School District and Denver Classroom Teachers Association to come back from their break. One of the members of the DCTA bargaining team just came in to the room, so that might mean that they're going to be heading back in a few moments. But they also did say they might need 30 minutes, which would mean that they're not going to be back for probably, they could be back in another 10 minutes.
No, they don't. They go to Sandra because it's a dual Montessori. So they are learning the Spanish very sufficiently before they go to Montessori. But my school have this, I teach in Spanish, everything in Spanish, but they grow up to move to only Spanish.
If you are just tuning in, this is Alex with Unicorn Riot. We've been live now for over 3.5 hours at the second bargaining meeting between Denver Public Schools and Denver Classroom Teachers Association since the DCTA voted to approve a strike. The strike vote was at 93%. That happened about 2 weeks ago. And a couple days ago, the DCTA, or Denver Classroom Teachers Association, announced an official strike start date of this coming Monday, February 11th. However, even with this impending strike dates, they're still here trying to come to an agreement on at least part of their demands. Tonight they've been primarily talking about professional development units, or PDUs, and those are what help the teachers get higher pay. as time goes on in their teacher career. It also helps them maintain their teacher license. And there are teachers who don't believe how it's set up right now, how the contract is set up right now, that it's fair, because they're encouraged to do minimum requirements of PDUs to be able to make a livable wage, when they're saying that they should already start out at a livable wage and be able to increase their pay as time goes on to make more than a livable wage.
They are like already behind. They already have that label in there. Yes, and it's
Another point to make is the Denver Teachers Union has been talking about how administration and the business part of Denver Public Schools makes more than the teachers, and how they keep getting bonuses when the teachers aren't making a livable wage. And somebody actually wrote on a whiteboard, I'll pan over in a second, it says, Debbie Hardy, comma, tell us why you got a $13,020 bonus.
That's what I was saying. It's not only I'm going for it, right? Not only for money, but it's like
This is what it's like eating one of these.
So right there on the whiteboard to the right is where it asks that question. And the big pieces of white paper on the wall there behind the screen were found in the recycling bin by folks here. They are apparently from the Denver Public Schools bargaining team of how they will be training new substitutes while the strike begins. We should be back at this meeting soon. The Denver Public Schools District had proposed a new offer, hoping that the DCTA would agree to it. However, DCTA said that they are not ready to sign it as it is, and that they needed extra time to read it over and think about it to even decide what else needs to be changed in it, and that is why they're breaking right now to talk about that.
That makes sense. I know, you have to be there. I have to be there myself. And I
All right, they are coming back. We just heard from other folks. Here they come. The meeting is going to commence again.
halfway through, I'm like, I need to get you a coffee or something like that.
Struggle.
Can you hear like the whole bargaining team starting to talk?
It's because of the proposal, we're sick of it.
Because we spend too much time together. What's up?